welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting for this evening on this September 24th. And Dee, would you call roll, please?
Mayor Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Chapman.
Here.
Councilmember McCall. Here. Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Records.
Here.
Councilmember Sorensen.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Pat Wright notified us that she could not be here tonight. Do I hear a motion to excuse?
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Under announcements tonight, we have a number of them. Make your way to the SEL Event Center tomorrow for this year's Wellness and Education Expo from 11:30 until 5:30. You can see local offerings to empower you to keep your health and wellness on track. September is National Library Card Registration Month, and staff at Pullman Neal Public Library stand ready to help you explore, discover, and connect at your library. Music on Main every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. downtown Pullman at the High Street Plaza. Everyone is welcome. Music is free. Pullman's Fresh to You Farmers Market open through October 16th, Wednesdays 3:30 to 6:30 at the Brailsford WSU Visitors Center. We have the charrettes taking place next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, October 1st and 2nd. This is Help the Shape of the Downtown Future. It'll take place Tuesday and Wednesday from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Gladish Community Center in the View Room. Also to remind everyone, October 10th is the 2019 Palouse Basin Water Summit, and that'll take place at the SEL Events Center, and it goes between 4:30 and 8 p.m. We were notified recently from the State Historic Preservation Officer, Allison Brooks, that the Northern Pacific Railway Depot on Grant Avenue has been now designated on the National Register of Historic Places, where it joins properties which contribute to the rich cultural heritage of Washington State. And under that, we have a proclamation to read tonight, and we have some representatives in the back row from the Northern Pacific Railway Depot, the Pullman Depot that they're raising funds for right now. So we'll read the proclamation. Whereas early Pullman history notes that the town of 500 people had 3 railroads, which seems incredible. But the fact that 1885, the Columbia and Palouse Railway, later a branch of the Oregon-Washington Railway and Navigation Company, built a road into Pullman, and the first train came over the line to Pullman on September 8, 1885. And whereas railroads influenced the name of the city inasmuch as being named after railroad tycoon George Pullman, and whereas railroads are crucial to Pullman's development, carrying for many decades WSU students, agricultural products, and goods for Pullman stores, and whereas the Whitman County Historical Society had the vision to purchase the historic Northern Pacific Railroad Depot in 2018 with the goal of making Pullman's past come alive for students, families, individuals, and visitors. And the name Pullman Depot Heritage Center was chosen to reflect the breadth of programs and exhibits planned, as well as activities already underway. And whereas generous donors are helping the society pay off the loans to begin renovation of the building, 2 railroad cars in the grounds, and whereas the Pullman Depot Heritage Center has been placed on the country's National Register for Historic Places, recognizing it as a treasure for our community. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Glenn Johnson, the mayor of the city of Pullman, declare Tuesday, September 24th as Pullman Depot Heritage Center Day, and encourage all citizens to recognize the value of the depot and support its renovation and activities wherever possible. Linda is in the back, and she was going to make a comment about it. She's one of the organizers of this, and maybe you could pass this off over to her so she can have the original copy of the proclamation. So you can have that, and if you'll just come to the microphone, give you a couple minutes there.
My name is Linda Hackbarth, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Pullman Depot Heritage Center. The Historical Society bought the building in March of 2018, so we've been in operation for a little better than a year now. And I want to invite you to check out the upcoming community update publication when it comes out the first of the month, because we'll have a one-page spread there encouraging all the community to join with us in contributing to the depot project. We're working now with Design West to come up with more of a facilities plan, but we are up and running. We're open on Saturdays from 10 until 4, And this coming Monday night, we'll have one of our monthly evening programs. It'll be on the one-room schoolhouses of the county. So we alternate each month having a evening program, either a book talk or some type of informational session about Pullman pioneers in some way. We have a website, pullmandepot.org, and also the Whitman County Historical Society has its own website. So I invite you to become involved. We have 7 operating subcommittees and a 9-member executive group. So far, Pullman has been fantastic contributing volunteers toward this endeavor. We think we're in a fantastic location right in the middle of downtown along the river. We want to restore the building back to its original condition or look and add exhibits and for both adults and children within the complex ourselves. We are on a several-year plan at this point, and so the fundraising will be very important to us. We will be going out for grants and other ways to support the development of and restoration of the building. But any help you can give us would be deeply appreciated. Thanks so much, Glenn.
Thank you, Linda. We have 2 reports coming in tonight. First of all, Housing Needs Assessment. Gina Cruz is here, Partnership for Economic Prosperity. And Gina, if you want to make your presentation now, fill the council in. I know you've already handed out a brochure on the Blues Regional Housing Assessment, so I think all the council members have it.
Councilmember Chapman, so if I can, I'd like to
Okay, sure.
give that to him, so we pass that.
Certainly.
Good evening. Thank you for the chance to stand before you and present our housing needs assessment. It is a regional assessment. As you remember talking about just maybe a year ago, we talked about the fact that we share our workforce here in our community and communities, and it's important that we look at this issue in our region as a region. And so what we have here tonight, you have in front of you the executive summary and then an appendix that talks a little bit, and Brian will probably go into great detail therein. We will release the hard copies of everything tomorrow morning, so I will probably be making a little bit of a trip over here with some hard copies for you. It is a baseline of what is happening in our region as far as housing. It is not an indictment of anything that's being done right or wrong by any of the policymakers by any means, but it is a baseline and a place for us as policymakers to start making some informed decisions about housing in our region. So I'm going to introduce to you, looks like Brian Points. He was our point man consultant throughout this whole process, and I have worn him out. So be nice to him, please.
All right, well, one of the challenges of summarizing a 120-page report in 15 minutes is that you can't possibly satisfy everybody's levels of interest and questions. So just keep in mind, as Gina mentioned, report is going to be publicly released tomorrow. We'll have a few select hard copies, and then plenty of electronic can go out to whoever would like to see those. So as Gina also noted, the reason we wanted to look at this is that we know as a region that economic development and housing are intertwined. You cannot look at one of those issues without looking at another issue. We don't want, as a region, just to look at housing as an infrastructure issue or a public works kind of issue. It's also simultaneously an economic development issue, so hence the Partnership for Economic Prosperity. It hasn't been that long, really, since housing has come onto the public consciousnus as an affordability issue. And for that reason, there's frankly not a lot of places in the country that are doing a great job of dealing with it. Right now, it doesn't take much to be average in terms of housing, in terms of your policy, in terms of your production, in terms of your affordability. All you have to do is go with the flow and you will be average. We were not asked to tell the region how to be average. We were asked to tell them how to resolve issues and how to be above average. And for that reason, some of the recommendations we've come up with probably are going to be a bit of a stretch and a bit of a challenge to implement. We're aware of that. What we sought to do is to find places in the United States that had similar context and similar problems and say, here's some of the things that they were doing to deal with that. And it's going to be up to the leadership as they inherit the reins of this project to determine how to implement that locally. Also, importantly, I want to emphasize that we were, my organization, Thomas P. Miller and Associates, was not specifically asked to look at affordable housing. We were asked to look at housing. And that's important because there are all types of different housing for all types of different income levels, and all of those income levels have different needs. So in the report, when you all read it, you will see that we much more often use terms such as attainable housing because it's not as much of a loaded term as affordable housing is, and it has a different kind of connotation. So briefly about the firm that I work for, Thomas P. Miller and Associates. I happen to live here locally. I live in Moscow, but our company is located in Indianapolis. We focus on community and economic development issues such as those that are summarized here. Okay, so you can see objectives and approach, and as you look at that, I have a few other things to say. Before we talk about what we found, it's important to talk about the why of why we looked at it. Some of the questions initially for, why do we need to do a study like this? It was to figure out some of the quantitative stuff. So we know housing, attainable housing is an issue around here, but we don't know who exactly is affected by that. In what way are they affected? To what degree are the industry leaders inhibited by lack of housing? Some of those very particular questions we wanted to answer, but more than all the statistics, we also wanted to bring in recommendations, which, as I mentioned, we've put a lot of time into digging into. And within the report, there's probably over 20 places where we say, here's X community and what they've done about this particular situation. So here's the tasks that we undertook to complete this analysis. It was a 9-month project. We did a lot of research using census data, National Affordable Housing Coalition data, HUD data, anything we could find, some proprietary sources. We also looked up, we also accessed information by talking to people. That was very important to this process. So the stakeholder engagement component included talking to 18 community leaders, which were local government leaders, housing developers, major companies in the region, as well as just community leaders. All of them had important perspectives for us to listen to here. Also important to note, and Gina touched on this as well, that we really wanted to be agnostic about whether this is a Pullman thing or a Moscow thing or a Whitman or Latah thing. It's both. And for that reason, when we come up with our housing forecast and all of our recommendations, we don't say this one is for this place and this one is for this place. I mean, frankly, I think, and I see this more and more the longer that I live here, people don't really differentiate that much. They think of themselves as community members of the Palouse, and a lot of them are living in one place and going to another place for work. And if we're able as a region to rally behind that and produce more housing, that's going to be better for both of the communities, both of the primary communities as well as the outlying communities. Okay, I am an economist, and I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I didn't show you some charts. So here are some charts. There's a lot of data here, all right? This one's kind of a complicated one to process, but what we wanted to do is show that there's different levels of affordability, whether you're a renter or an owner of the home that you're living in. According to HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, as well as the Census Bureau, if somebody's spending greater than 30% of their household budget on housing, they're considered cost burdened. So that's one of those litmus tests for, how bad is the issue. When we look at that overall for the region, 38% of the region's population is what you would consider cost burdened. For a benchmark, 31% is the national average. For the state of Idaho, 28% is the average, and for the state of Washington, 32% is the average. So not surprisingly, we are above average in terms of percent of people who are cost burdened. Now, what somebody may say is, yeah, but you have a lot of students. Okay, good point. And it's not easy to really parse out the census data and say we're going to set aside these students and look at these other people. We couldn't exactly do that. The best thing that we could do is try to look at some other proxies and metrics to demonstrate that affordability is for an issue for not just students, but for other people as well. So you see some of these statistics here. For example, 16% of those earning $50,000 to $75,000 as a household are cost burdened. That, almost 1 in 5. So obviously this is not just a student issue. More and more renters. I think it's pretty obvious to all of us that we've had a lot of multifamily that's developed over the past 8 years on the Palouse, and that naturally has led to a lot more renters. So just to indicate the level of that change, if you look at adults, what the Census Bureau would consider adults, people 25 years or older, between 2007 and 2015, you've had a 7% increase in adults who are homeowners. You've had a 46% increase in adults who are renters. It's a 7-fold difference. So that is going with a national trend. Okay, since the recession, more adults have been living multifamily. But this is beyond that national trend. This is definitely an exceptional rate of growth in rentership. Another thing that we looked at with this is kind of I guess a cultural assumption of, well, maybe millennials like to rent. They don't want the burden of being a homeowner and all the stuff that comes with that. There is perhaps some truth to that, but we also we didn't do a survey of the people in the community, but we did look at surveys that were done on that issue. And generally speaking, when you look nationally, millennials still want to be homeowners. It's not the desire that inhibits them, it's the cost that inhibits them primarily. And as we'll see, part of what contributes to cost is size of housing. And a lot of that is driven by local regulation, which prevents things from getting below a certain minimum square footage. Okay, before we get to some recommendations, we obviously have to define what the issues are. Again, slide loaded with a lot of information here. And the issues that we identified in order: construction, economic, community, and government and regulatory. So just to touch on a few of those as you peruse this, construction is hard here. It's expensive here. It's just plain more expensive than other places. And that's because we're a long ways away from metropolitan centers, from the suppliers of materials, and from labor who can do construction. That's nobody's fault. That's just something that exists here that we have to deal with. Something that we noticed both in Moscow and Pullman is that the student communities really benefit the area a lot. They contribute a lot. The universities contribute a lot. But there is this issue of some community members wanting to see a bit more kind of differentiation between student housing areas and community housing areas. And we think there are some things that can be done with overlay zoning that could, as well as just kind of producing more amenities that would encourage students to live within a certain area that might help out. We're also, generally speaking, the region is off the radar in terms of developers. Okay, developers may have some inkling of where Moscow and Pullman is, but they're not here right now. Instead, those developers that could be building here are building up in Coeur d'Alene and Hayden and Spokane Valley and places like that. And that's something that we have to grapple with as well. Housing gap. So to get to the numbers, what we came up with is that over the next 10 years, to fulfill the demand that exists for existing residents as well as the people who could live here and who want to live here and who are needed to continue fueling the economy forward, we need 3,200 some total units, of which the balance should be single-family homes, because that's where the region isn't producing that. The region is kind of generally taking care of the multifamily. We have developers who have figured out how to do that, but it's not really taking care of single-family. So that'd be about 270 units, single-family units per year. That's nearly double what we've produced on average over the past 10 years. So, okay, kind of ambitious goal, but we think it's doable. Key recommendations. Here are some of the things that we came up with. First and perhaps foremost is develop a Palouse housing leadership team that's cross-boundary and multidisciplinary. We've assigned a lot of concepts and a lot of work to the community to work on here, and that's going to take more than a few people to figure out. So that team needs to be established if this effort is going to be successful. The next series of recommendations, from priority land set-asides down to rural housing transition zones, have to do with government and regulatory kinds of things. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Thomas P. Miller and Associates is not a legal firm. What we're saying is, here's some things that have worked in similar settings, but any recommendation we could come up with is going to look different based on the community that you're in. So it's really, it's up to the community at some point to figure out how to take that concept and apply it. To use an example, in King County, on the other side of Washington, they've developed what's called the Regional Coalition for Housing. We highlighted it in the report. 15 cities. It's funded by a combination of city, federal tax credits, county funding, as well as the ARCH Housing Trust Fund. Okay, that's a concept that worked really well for them locally, and they're able to do some things that help reduce some costs for developers of certain types of housing. Maybe that works here, maybe it doesn't, but it's a concept that's worth studying. Grants, further down the list there. I was just talking to a client earlier today, a former client down in California. We did a study for him a couple of years ago, and he said, yeah, we were able to use this study to go get money from the Economic Development Administration. And again, I'm not going to make any guarantees, but this is generally what I see in my profession, is that when you show that you know what you're going to do and you have good leadership behind it, you will find money to implement those things. Whether that's what grant funders are looking for, whether it's state, federal, or nonprofit. So I hope and foresee that there will be some of that in the future. Clarity in development standards. I think this is really important across the community. Generally speaking, people don't speak the language of urban planning and real estate development, but a lot of our people are landowners. They potentially could be doing some of those things, but they just don't understand how it works. So we could do a better job of breaking that down and simplifying how it works. Okay. I just wanted to show this slide quickly, and I won't spend a lot of time talking about it. The point of this is that we have a particular page in the report that shows it aligns issues with recommendations with best practices. So we wanted to make it really clear for anybody who's reading this, just pick up this page, like, where do I go to find out about how X works? Tiny homes or senior housing. Okay, I'll go to this section and you can read up about it. So some of the housing types, one of the things that we found is that generally speaking, the Palouse region is pretty, it has multifamily and it has large single family and not a whole lot else in between, right? There's this missing middle, and trailers, right? But there's this huge missing middle. You can buy a trailer for less than 100 grand, or you can buy a new house for over 350 grand. But what do you do if that doesn't fit your budget and your priorities? Not a lot to do. So what we really want to do is provide some fodder for that missing middle. And here are some of the concepts that we came up with. Small single-family homes, so think of something that's in that 1,000 to 1,500 square foot range. They tend to exist in a neighborhood setting that has some common area and is smaller footprint, environmentally friendly, and it's been very popular in a lot of places. Agri-hoods is a concept that hasn't really picked up very much in Washington or Idaho, but it's picking up nationally. It's basically the concept of taking a functional agricultural operation like an orchard or a farm and putting housing around it and letting the community become part of that. Tiny homes, you've got tiny homes that are on wheels, you've got tiny homes that are on foundations. I don't have a lot to say to you about tiny homes on wheels. I don't think it's going to make a big difference whether you want more of those or not. But tiny homes on foundations can make a big difference. So that's when you're talking about homes that are generally less than 1,000 square feet. And we're seeing some good models nationally of where those can be used to be implanted into mobile home parks, for example, that have an aging stock of housing and need a new alternative to that. But it takes a little bit of thought and some consideration of building and zoning codes to make that possible. Accessory dwelling units, so something that's can be legally done, both in Moscow and Pullman, but there are certain limitations on square footage as well as parking and other things that are probably worth some revisiting, because some lowering of those minimums is probably going to help produce some more infill housing that's not going to add a lot of additional traffic or anything like that. Modular built. To highlight another one on here, modular isn't so much about what the house looks like, it's about the methodology of how it's built, and that could be done here, could be done somewhere else, but the point is that it makes that labor issue easier, because it doesn't require the craftsmen that build stick-built homes. You can put that into a factory setting. They're working indoors 24/7. They're generally doing more routine tasks, right? And a lot of times you can actually contract with modular builders from other places that already have that workforce worked out, and then just move that housing into your area. So that's a few of the ideas. Much more could be said about it. So as far as next steps, I mentioned the Palouse Housing Leadership Team. That's important. Gina and I are talking about that, and we'll continue to talk about that until we get it worked out. That group is going to have to do some additional research. That's probably not a popular thing to say after 9 months of doing research, but it's just the way it is, right? You've got to figure out, how does this work? How can we make this work in our community? And for that same reason, you also have to really interface and engage with planning and zoning and public works and all the regional agencies to make sure that we're doing something that's workable and that people are happy with. And what else happens? It's to be determined. We will see. So those are the key points, and hopefully I got across 120 pages in 15 minutes.
No, he didn't. It was about 22 minutes. But but is there any questions right away? Otherwise, because we have other presentations tonight. So.
Okay, well, there's a few, but I can talk to Gina later. I did have a question regarding, you're talking about student housing zones. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, sectioning off a section of a city just for student housing. That's what you're kind of...
Not precisely, and I think it's important with that one in particular to note that we neither encourage nor is it legal to say students live here, other people live there. The point is that you create an amenity base that's attractive to that population, and through overlay zoning, you are able to do things in that area that you perhaps can't do in other areas. So changing parking code and... What's that?
Such as?
Such as...
Changing the zoning to make it more amenable to students?
Right, so making it so you can have more density in a particular area, for example. And then through regional planning, you make sure you've got bus routes that are ready to that area, make sure you got bike lanes, make sure it's an area where students would want to live. And you're not saying that they have to live there, but they would probably want to live there, all things considered.
That was one other question. I didn't see a whole lot of discussion regarding mixed-use development in there. Mm-hmm. And of course, with your discussion of having more single-family homes, that's a fairly large footprint to put into expanding city borders and eating up rural lands. I don't know, it seems to kind of harken back to a early 1900s view of how to grow a city. I'm just trying to understand the concept behind this, because it adds cost to the city. It does, grow into what people like, the rolling hills and so on. So could you explain a little bit about, why you feel that's...
Yeah, I think one of the biggest suggestions that we have is to densify and upzone to make it so that single-family housing doesn't have to take up as much space as it has in the past, and doesn't have to have the same kind of automobile footprint as it has in the past. So yeah, I understand that concern, but part of this is not just saying you need more single-family homes. I do think we can't lose track of the fact that some people still do want the large footprint, single-family homes, and that's part of that professional base that's moving here from places like the West Side that are fueling some of our industry. But that said, part of this is changing the model of how single-family housing is done so that you don't have a lot of the same problems that have come.
Is that some of the concept of rural transition? Is that what you were?
The rural transition, it's part of that, but that's also about when you drive around to some of the communities. This more has to do with Whitman County and Latah County outside of the cities. It's a bit ad hoc in terms of what the usage is in a particular area, and that doesn't really encourage a lot of community cohesion. So it's about just being a bit more organized and deliberate with what those communities should look like.
Very interesting. I'm not going to take up any more time, but I'd love to talk to you further, Gina, yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Brett.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Gina. Our next presentation tonight is from Rick Lytle, who's the CEO of KLAR Scientific. Had a chance to meet Rick here a while back. It stems from WSU Research. And Aziz Hani from Small Business Administration put me on to Rick and had a chance to hear about some of the great things that are going on. We want to make sure the council had a chance to hear about it as well.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me to speak tonight. I'll try and whip through my 45 slides. No, I'm kidding. I tend to put together long presentations because I really like this job and I really like this company. But I'm going to tell you about KLAR, briefly what we do and why it's interesting. And then the main point I wanted to give you tonight is, what is it like to start a company in Pullman, Washington? Now, I come from Silicon Valley. Excuse me, that's where I kind of grew up in my technical chops and in school. And there's a lot of mechanisms there to start a company. There's also a lot of venture capital. There are also a lot of mean people. The difference is, in Pullman, I found a very comfortable, supportive environment. I want to tell you a little bit about that. So KLAR in a snapshot, we're a technology company. I apologize if there's a little bit too much jargon. We make spectroscopic microscopes, and these are things, as I'll show you, where you use light to determine what something is. Well, what does that mean? Well, you can look at something or you can measure some property of it. We happen to shine light on things and measure properties, and as I'll show you, that's a way of getting a fingerprint of a material. We launched in 2016 in Pullman. We're a spin out of the physics department. My co-founder is really the inventor of the key technology in this. His name is Matt McCluskey in the physics department. I'm an adjunct professor there, and I happened to wander the halls one night when Matt was there, and he said, "Hey, I want to start a company. You want to do that?" I said, "Sure, why not?" First thing we did is we got together with WSU and did a license agreement. We got some grants from the National Science Foundation, and we put some of our own money into it. So it's a self-funded operation. We have a vision for the company. Selling boxes is one thing. Connecting the world, like Google does, with search, we want to do that for identification. And I'll show you what that means. Okay, so here's something. Here's a piece of emerald. You know what that is. But if you don't know what it is, what you can do is shine a light onto it. This is a little pen laser, but we use bigger lasers. And when you shine a light and measure the properties, you get what's called a spectrum. It's basically like a prism. You shine light into a material and it emits at different wavelengths or different colors. The colors and the intensity of those things look like that little plot there. And they're unique to the material, so it's a fingerprint. So here's a fingerprint of emerald. And I have a little instrument there that I can use to do that with. And if I measure that, I get a fingerprint. What good is that? Well, here's a couple of things we did. We do sophisticated research. So I sent an intern around to pick up some leaves from the campus. We happened to do this during the fall, so we managed to get a maple leaf that was a little bit yellow. The point is here that we've got different organic objects, and if you look at the spectra, which are the colors emitted when the light shines on these, they're different. Not only are they different, they're noticeably different. We can characterize them very precisely as to the shape and the color that come out and the intensity or the magnitude. And when we do that, we should be able then to locate our sensors in fields to be able to detect if there's variations in all kinds of quantities that are of interest to people. So if you've got a vineyard, you already know how to do moisture tests. You wander around and do sugar tests. We want to be able to sort of make this automated so that when you have a static field and you happen to be growing something, or you've got livestock and you want to know, is there a disease that's propagating in the area, Well, we will have our sensors around, we'll be able to measure the properties of the substance and also any bacteria or other disease characteristics. Mapping them out then using some sophisticated software like Google does when it does cluster maps of small world networks, or LinkedIn does that, if you've used LinkedIn. I hope not, but this is the kind of thing that we expect to do with our technology. And the advantage of doing something like this is if we can snap a picture either in our lab or out in the field somewhere and put it into the cloud with some metadata, which is a description of what it is, where we found it, who found it, what color we think it is, what kind of substance we think it is, put all that data into a search library. That's like a Google repository. In fact, we proved this technology actually works by running it through Google's search engine. We took a lot of our images, we put them on the web, we waited a week. Google's spider crawls the web looking for new things. It found our images. We put in a sample image, and it came back and gave us 3 different top characteristics or top candidates for our images. So the technology would work if you had an operating model where you interfaced everybody through the cloud and you had a central server. And so we're trying to build a system like this. It's a grand vision. It's going to cost us a lot of money. Right now, we're not that ambitious. We're trying to build the technology and prove that it works by selling it to academics, because academics want to measure everything, and they don't know what most of the stuff is that they make. So, they come to us and say, hey, Rick, we got this piece of thing we made, and it's got zinc in it and some other things, and we need to know whether we made it right. We say, well, give it to us, put it in our little portable instrument, which we've now built 4 of. We scan the surface, we collect the maps of the intensity and the colors, and we come back and we tell them what we found. So here's an example. These are pretty pictures. On the top here, we have a couple of scientists over in the physics department who made a semiconductor called cad zinc telluride. Trust me, it's a material that people use for solar cells and other things. And they make it in a very weird process. And then what they need to know is how much zinc did they put into the thing as they're pulling it out of a bath of acid and all these other chemicals. And so they slice off a sample, they give it to us, we scan the surface, the colors tell us what the emitted energy or wavelength of the light is. That tells us directly how much zinc there is. So we get a direct map aerially. So think of this, if this were a big field, and now we're giving you this information for, your vines, say, or your crops, you'd say, oh, it's nice to have a map of all that different thing. We're doing this mapping on something that's only about 100 microns in size. This is really small. Down here, we've got a set of light-emitting diodes from a company in Silicon Valley. They also have very expensive processes for putting these things together. This thing's a little bit bigger. It's about 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. We've found, if you look down here at the red spots, defects. Those changes in energy are due to a structural change in the layers that make up this device. And it's an extremely complicated device with maybe 100 layers of semiconductor produced by sputtering. And it costs a lot of money. And they were throwing it away. So they came to us and said, help us not throw away our money anymore. We said, sure. And if we do that, you'll buy our instrument. A fair deal. So in a nutshell, we put together at the top a couple of prototype lab bench devices, which are portable, and they're affordable. They're about the 1/5 the cost of what people normally buy today for microscopes for this kind of thing. But we also said, look, we don't really know what the market for this is. We know there's thousands of laboratories we can sell these to, and they're priced to the point where somebody can actually sign off on a purchase order without having to go to his boss or her boss. So like $50,000 is a good price opposed to $500,000, which is what they normally cost. But we still don't know how many people are going to buy these things. So I don't know how much capital I need. I don't know really what the model should be for the business. So we explored it by saying, look, send us your stuff. We'll start a test and measurement service. We will measure the properties. First, we'll do it for free. Then we'll do it at half price. And then we'll charge you a regular rate. And so we put together a model like that where we charge people. And they go online to our website, and that's where this is. And they can press a little button that says, pay here. Well, we like that. We put this into live action 2 weeks ago. We got our first purchase order last week, and we got our first check. So now we have a little plaque on the wall, which is pretty good for a company that's about 3 years old. Now, I'm actually going to, this is a bunch of words. I'm going to describe how we started this thing, because I think this is most illustrative to the group that's here. This is Matt McCluskey, professor of physics. Matt's a very bright guy. He came up with an idea. He went to the school. They said, we have this thing called a commercialization gap fund, where if you have a technology as a professor and you think it has commercial value, we'll give you money if you win a competition. And you'll go prove it. If you prove it, then you might be able to go out and get some more money. So Matt did this in 2015. I happened to be on the review committee, and I've been doing that for a few years. And afterward, I looked at that and said, this is the only presentation I see here that looks like it's feasible as a commercial thing. And I let it go for about a few months, and then, as I said, I saw Matt in the hallway, and he pulled me into his office and said, I really want to do this. I said, well, don't start a company yet, because we need to figure out what the plan is. You don't want to start burning the dollars. And he says, oh, I already started it. So did you file with the state of Washington? Yes. Okay. Did you file a limited liability? Yes. Okay. Do you want to be a co-founder, Rick? Sure. So that's how we got started. But you need money. And Matt and I just decided that we liked this so much and we believe in it that we put our own money on the table. So we put some money into the company. The first thing we did actually was go to the university, and this is a lesson I learned a long time ago. When you're starting a company with somebody else's technology, you have to go to them and ask them whether they will let you do that. And I tried a long time ago to start a company with Lockheed's technology when I was a director there, and they didn't like it. So that was a long time ago, and I learned my lesson. I haven't done that since. So we went to WSU's commercial group. They exist to license to startups. They do a lot of this. And they've been very supportive of us. I have a meeting with them Thursday to discuss some changes in our license. But it's fabulous to find a group that not only exists in the university, it wants to help you. And they don't just stand up and say, well, we want 90% of your equity or else. They actually want to do a fair deal. Okay? Now, about this time, we said, National Science Foundation also has money. Let's go to them and we'll apply for a grant. So we did that. That was in June of 16. In the fall, we found out WSU has another program from NSF, National Science Foundation, called I-Corps. What is I-Corps? I-Corps is a place where they train you how to go talk to a customer. Well, it's actually not to talk to a customer, how to listen to a customer. So you meet somebody and you say, hey, how do you measure your stuff? Oh, my problems are this, that, and the other thing. You take notes. And then you ask them questions, and then you go away and think, that's not what I had in mind. I just learned something. Maybe I don't want to do what I thought. Maybe I want to go do what this person thinks. You do that to about 100 different interviews during this process. We sent one of our young persons from our initial group into this program, and he got a really good sense of what customers want. We went to the National Science Foundation, as I said. Our Phase 1 grant came in 2016, $210,000. They have another one called a Phase 2, which is a lot bigger. We won that and started that a year ago. And then they came up with a supplementary funding for a derivative product, which was based on the same technology, but another customer came to us and said, if only your product worked in the ultraviolet region, that would be a great thing. We went to NSF and said, if only our product worked in the ultraviolet region, that would be a great thing. And they said, how much do you want? So we got that. So altogether, $1 million. So you got our seed funding and $1 million, and what's next? A place to put people. You familiar with the research park? Research and Technology Park. So many years ago, I did a spin out of a company called Centel Technologies from physics. And so I was familiar with this group. And so when we needed space, we went over to the leasing office, and they were terrific again. They walked us through, they showed us what was available, they gave us a good rate, and they also gave us a lot of furniture. Furniture is a really good thing to have because you don't want to spend your own money on furniture. Use somebody else's. But more than that is they're very tolerant of things that we do in these rooms. These are offices, but we have lasers going on, and we have a lot of safety precautions in there. But we make sure that we follow all the regulations for the state. and keep everybody safe. But this exists. And these three names I'm showing you here are three of Matt's PhD students, all of who worked in this area. So our staff consists of myself, Matt, who are physics people, and three other physicists. 5 PhDs in the company is always dangerous. Fortunately, I've been contaminated by business, so I'm not as good as they are in physics anymore, but they really click. So they get together and advances are made very rapidly because, well, they work together. They know what to do and what not to do. And so we've really skyrocketed along. It's just been really great. Why do it this way? Why not just go down to Silicon Valley and say, I have a new technology, I'm going to go up to Sand Hill Road and ask for $1 billion? Well, you can do that, but then somebody else owns the company, and also somebody else owns you. This is a good way to do it because we work at our own pace. We decide what we want to do. We talk to customers directly, and we can go back and make changes immediately. So we don't have any set plan. We're having to be true to ourselves. We're the investors right now. So we've gotten a lot of leverage out of doing that. The university's been extremely friendly to us, and that's unusual. I worked for a number of years. I was a grad student at Stanford. Back in those days, they were mean to startups. They fired a lot of professors who went off and did startups and then wanted to come back. They don't do that anymore. So Stanford is a place that's learned how to do this, but WSU seems to have a knack for it. It's just really good with entrepreneurs. So if you're a faculty member or you know them, you want to go to the university and be honest about it and say, here's what I would like to do. And the other aspect is you maintain control as long as possible. Now, at some point, we have to step up and be, wear the grown-up pants, as they say, and bring in some serious capital to go to production. And that's going to happen in the next year or two. But for now, we've got a nice little startup around the corner. I'm very pleased to be working with it. And I honestly owe Pullman a real debt here. I really want to say thank you. I know you're not the leasing office, but you are part of the community, and the community has really been good to us. And we continue to believe we're going to be here. We're not going to move this company. So
That's great.
that's it. Thank you.
And when I heard Rick's presentation, we met with me in the office. I'm trying, this is something that council should hear just because of the great connection with WSU. Sometimes you always hear, well, universities weren't all that cooperative, but to hear that kind of story that they've worked with you very well, it's a great story to hear. Any questions? Yeah, Nathan?
Yeah, this is really interesting, the technology. I have a question regarding that. So when I worked with the NASA Earth Observing Satellite System, it sounds a little bit like the EO1 instrumentation or the AVIS. Is that kind of the infrared
Right.
technology, or is
So
it more
it's-
ion mobility spectrometry?
No. It's exactly that. You're looking at the light emission from something. When you're looking at the infrared, you're usually looking at things that are warm. So you're looking for temperature variations, and that comes from living objects as well as non-living objects that are warm, like ocean currents and things. Our technology is based on the same kind of thing. It's spectroscopy, which means that what physics people generally do in their lives is they shine something on something else and they look at what comes off. That's what physics is. We smash particles together and see what comes out. We smash light into things and see what comes out. Sunlight goes off something and we measure it. That's the same kind of thing. The difference is here we're using a microscope so we can look at very tiny things to very high precision. And also that it's got an invention, I didn't really talk about it all here, that allows the instrument to actually autofocus. So you can take a substance that's got rough surface. And it's almost unheard of that you could actually get an accurate measurement across that. But ours does it automatically. This is a patent that we licensed from the university and managed to show that it works. So it now runs in our instruments. That was a big breakthrough for us. But otherwise, it's very similar.
Very good.
Rick, thank you again for the presentation. We
My
appreciate it
pleasure.
very
Thanks
much.
for the
And
patience.
thank
there.
you for staying in Pullman with this company.
Oh, yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'm really happy. Thank you.
Before we go to the consent agenda, as you see, there's a number of Girl Scouts in our audience tonight. And tonight is a school night, and instead of making them wait till the end for new business, we're going to have the Girl Scouts give us their presentation to us now. They all have little speeches. They all have, I've checked them out, they're like a couple paragraphs. You're going to introduce them, and this is all part of citizenship, and also they have a message they want to convey to the council. So with that,
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bridget Clark, and I'm one of the leaders of Troop 3210. And I've got 6 Girl Scout juniors, 5th graders, here to talk about a safety project, if you will, all girl-led, their idea. And let's make sure we're all in order here. We've got Kara and Adrian, and Aman and Chloe, and then MJ and Harmony. And they would like to leave you with something concrete about their idea in 2.5 paragraphs. So if they can approach with this
Oh, yes.
handout, that would be great at the end, okay? May I move the microphone?
Yes, please.
Okay, so, speak in.
Hello. Hello. We are Girl Scouts from Troop 3210. We are doing a service project to make school zones safer for bikers and pedestrians. We hope to achieve our goal by making like students without parental supervision to stay safe. We are trying to stop speeding on Southeast Harvest Drive because we know a lot of younger students who live there and walk or bike to school.
Southeast Harvest Drive connects to Southeast Crestview and Southeast Carroll Star. All these streets surround schools like the middle school and Franklin Elementary. In the morning and afternoon, there are lots of cars and children in the area where cars are going so fast. We see a need in this community for more walker and biker signs and a clear view of any driver.
Okay. Aman and I are not allowed to walk or bike to school of all the speeding on Northwest Tailview Drive. We would like to see the city add more school zones and biking signs on Northwest Tailview.
Many drivers are going way too fast while children and adults are walking to school, crossing the street, or just getting the mail. We would also like to see the city add bicycle sharrows towards the front of Kamiak Elementary School and the front and back of Lincoln Middle School. Most girls in our troop bike and walk to school as well as around town. They have noticed that there are limited crosswalks and signs within their walking distance from school, especially around Northwest Tailview and Southeast Harvest. We know the city is adding a delineator on Southeast Harvest, but this is to help for greater awareness. We feel strongly about making it safer around Northwest Tailview and Southeast Harvest. We feel the city can help by adding more school zone and biking signs. They are needed all around town, but we have to start somewhere.
We would appreciate your help on our Bronze Award Community Service project. Thank you.
Now you can present your material to us and for the council and also for Public Works and Planning down here too, if you have that.
Very much. Well done.
Thank you very much. We're all covered? All right.
Thank you so much. Well done.
Thank you very much. You did an excellent job in presentation, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you need to go home and get your homework done, right? You got much homework left, or you already did it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay. Again, thank you for being here. Item D on our agenda tonight is our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, Laura McAloon, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 3, 2019, and approve them as submitted. A motion approving a disbursement represented by electronic transfer 82519, totaling $57,817.32. A motion approving disbursements represented by accounts payable checks numbered 97143 through 97209, totaling $106,631.56. A motion approving disbursements represented by accounts payable checks numbered 97210 through 97282, totaling $3,340,000. $141,253.72. A motion approving disbursements represented by accounts payable checks numbered 97283 through 97309, totaling $422,339.13. Electronic transfers 549 through 543, totaling $617,116.55. Payroll checks numbered 74866 through 74881, totaling $28,856.75, and payroll direct deposits numbering 56550 through 56893, totaling $966,819.91. A motion approving disbursements represented by accounts payable checks numbered 97310 through 97422, totaling $1,075,732.61, and a motion setting a date of October 15, 2019 for a public hearing on 2020 revenue sources, City of Pullman.
Is there any item the council would like to offer discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 7. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we're going to adjourn the meeting of the City Council and convene the meeting of the Metropolitan Park District. We've already taken roll, and before you is a motion, item number 1, to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the Metropolitan Park District Special Meeting, November 13, 2018. Do I hear a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 2 is a motion to set a date of October 15, 2019 for public hearing on the 2020 revenue sources. Do I hear a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, now we reconvene the meeting of the City Council, and we now take item number 1, which is a public hearing on the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program. And with that, we call on our transportation experts. So let me get the right page here, and with that, Kevin Gardis.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The city's 6-year Transportation Improvement Program is developed annually along with the city's capital improvement program. It includes proposed transit division purchases and transportation projects planned to be constructed within the next 6-year period. TIP projects, as they're abbreviated, are part of the arterial streets and transit sections of the city CIP. Transit projects include an electrical upgrade for the bus barn to support electric bus purchases, bus shelters, solar lights at bus stops for safety, and replacement vehicles, including buses, paratransit, and a staff car. The transit vehicle purchases are highly dependent on available grant funding. Transportation projects include Grand Avenue and Center Street traffic signal, arterial streets resurfacing 2020, Crestview Drive bike ped path associated with the new City Hall, downtown enhancements that may come out of the Central Business District master plan work, Terraview Drive bike ped path, a complete streets project, Grand Avenue and Main street signal enhancements, and Terraview and North Fairway roundabout. Many of these projects are dependent on grant funding also. Council passed a resolution earlier this month that set the date to hold a public hearing on the TIP as today's date, September 24th. The Planning Commission considered the TIP at their meeting of July 24th, 2019, and found it consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The general action requested of the City Council tonight is to hold a public hearing and adopt the attached resolution approving the 2020-2025 Transportation Improvement Program, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Kevin on this? Seeing none at this time, we open a public hearing on the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program. Is there anyone who would like to make any comment regarding the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program? If you would, please come to the podium, identify yourself for the record, and also we'd appreciate if you'd sign in the book too at the same time. You can do that after your time, testify. All right.
I have a question.
Again, state your name for the record.
My name is Linda Meyer.
Okay.
I have a question on whether or not a roundabout could be put near Johnson Road and Professional Mall as well.
If possibly, it's pretty tight there. We've typically, I think roundabouts, when they first came out conceptually, were fairly big. They took up a lot of right-of-way, and that area is fairly constrained. with a bridge. Johnson Road is pretty close to the bridge. Again, Pro Mall on the other side, very close to the bridge. We would have to look at it. They've made some design revisions to roundabouts now to get them more compact and to better work with truck traffic. And there's truck traffic at both of those intersections. So it's possible, but I think it would be a challenge.
Okay. Anyone else who would like to make any comment on the 6-year transportation program? Going once, twice, we'll close the public hearing. With that, you mentioned you have a resolution?
I have a quick question.
Yes. Go ahead now.
Just a quick question on the Arturo Street Fund Crestview Path. What was that? What is that?
That is a bike ped path along the south side of Crestview. It would be on the, behind the sidewalk from Grand Avenue up to the entrance to New City Hall.
Okay.
So up from Wyso up to the City Hall.
Yeah, so right now there's sidewalk on that side. This would be a wider combination bike ped path. We've had some discussions with the school district about potentially taking the path where it would end at the City Hall driveway, basically,
And go
then
behind.
going south, and then dog-legging back up to the Lincoln Middle School, and connecting to the school that way, and providing a safe route for kids on that route, on that road.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? And then do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt Resolution R-66-19.
Second.
Second, Laura?
Resolution number R-66-19, a resolution approving a 6-year transportation improvement program for the city of Pullman for calendar years 2020 through 2025.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 2 is a public hearing resolution approving a 6-year capital improvement program for the city. And with that, Pete Dickens.
Thank you, Mayor. The Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is the city's annual 6-year plan for financing capital facilities, land acquisition, and equipment. Tonight you have before you the proposed CIP for the years 2020 through 2025, the same time frame as the TIP. The proposed CIP was formulated by the city's CIP committee, and this year we have 2 new members on the council on that committee, Brandon Chapman and Eileen McCall. Other participants on that committee consist of city staff, 2 planning commission members, and a citizen at large. This year, the CIP committee met on May 30 and June 19 to formulate the draft CIP. And on July 24, the planning commission found the proposed program consistent with the comprehensive plan. The resources for the various CIP projects come from a number of sources, including the general fund and Metro Park, information technology, utilities, transit, and street funds. In the proposed CIP for next year, there are multiple proposals related to the new City Hall property, which you probably noted. Those include general building improvements, a new generator, recreation-related projects supported by Metro Park funds, and information technology infrastructure through the IT fund. The other CIP proposals, which involve improvements at the Aquatic Center, Neal Public Library, the Police and Fire Departments, and the Public Works Department, they're all listed in Exhibit A to the draft resolution that you have before you. Since this is a public hearing, just like with the TIP, the action requested of you is to solicit public comment and then act on the resolution that you have in your agenda materials. And we have plenty of department heads here to answer any questions that you might have about these projects.
First of all, questions from the council or comments?
I think I have, I think I'm going to seek clarification, but can I do that after the public hearing?
Okay, certainly can. If that, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make comment on the CIP? So. And again, identify yourself for the record and also sign in the book, please. You can, you can sign in, you can talk right now and then sign in later.
Allison Harris. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for the pickleball courts. They are amazing. We've played on them 3 times since Friday, since the ribbon cutting, and they're awesome. We've got lots of groups together, and my husband and I are in the process of forming a formal pickleball club for Pullman. And we've had a lot of feedback from a lot of people who want to get involved with it. And I know there's a couple of missing pieces to our puzzle for pickleball in Pullman. And one of them I heard from Kurt is that the new Parks and Rec gym is going to have lines painted on the gym floor for pickleball for indoor pickleball during winter when you can't play on the outdoor courts, which is a big problem pickleballers have is during the winter, where do you play? So that's going to be awesome. So one thing I was going to request was maybe possibly, I don't know if this was in the plan already, but to buy 2 portable pickleball nets so that if we do get our club together, we don't have to bring our own private, some of us own our own private nets, but if some of us can't be there on the night that people want to play, then we don't have to go bring our nets over and then take them down and then haul them home. It would just be nice to have them there in the facility. And they're about $160 for the decent nets on Amazon, and we would need 2 of them, and I wondered if we could include that. I noticed there was volleyball nets and standards being
We can certainly
purchased.
take it under consideration, so. we
Yes,
can-
this is something to consider.
Yeah.
And then the other missing
Since you
piece.
already talked to Kurt, make him in his budget too, so.
Okay, and I didn't know if this was part of capital improvement or another area of the city government that would cover this, but I thought I'd bring it up here just in case. And then the other missing piece would be a lot of the feedback we're getting from the people who want to play pickleball with us is that we play in the daytime at noon twice a week, and a lot of people can't make it to come and play with us because they work during the day. And so they would love to play at night, but aside from a few weeks in the summer, you can't really play in the evenings past really 8 o'clock, and we like to play till about 9 or 9:30. And so it would be awesome if we could consider getting lights put at the Sunnyside pickleball courts so that we could play till 9, 9:30 in the summer and fall and spring. And then that would utilize the courts that are so beautiful and awesome even more.
All right.
So.
Thank you for your request. Next person, please.
So John Swenson, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to both Brandon Chapman and Mike for answering my questions via email. I've emailed my city council person about 6 times in the last 4 years and have got a response once. So I appreciate, even though you're not my council member, I really appreciate you responding to me. So one of the issues I have with this CIP, at least the documentation that's provided to us as the public, is we get this document dump on Friday, and then then it's discussion on Tuesday. And where particularly this CIP is almost inextricably connected to the resolution that was passed on August 13th, that connectedness between that August 13th resolution and how that's being paid for in the CIP proposal is really not very clear. There's almost no way to connect those dollar amounts that were given in the August 13th resolution with the pieces that are in, say, Exhibit A that was provided to us. And just as a quick example, one of them was, I'm still a little upset about the $3 million extra being spent on the City Hall over the 4.8 that was actually, supposed to be the base amount. That's a lot overspent. So, of course, my initial reaction to everything is that you're trying to tack more and more on, right? I mean, I shouldn't be such a cynic, but I am. And so, for example, in the CIP proposal, it ends up showing up that generator is going to cost $130 from the general CIP, and then another $130 from all of the other reserve funds that was discussed. And that matches the 50-50% that was set in that August 13th proposal or resolution, but in that resolution it was saying it was $200K, right? And so, my gut reaction is, we're now another 30% over what was passed in that resolution in August 13th. And it makes me start wondering how much other stuff is going over beyond what was passed in the August 13th resolution. Now, Mike sort of sorted that out and said that was wires crossing because of people who do CIP, and the people who did that resolution had different monies, and I don't know how that's resolved, whether you're going to go to the lower money, but I just...
1 minute left.
Okay.
1 minute left.
I'll be done here. So I just wish that there was some way when things like that August 13th resolution and the CIP proposal are so connected, at least in the parts associated with the new City Hall, that those documents would allow somebody like me who gets it on Friday, has stuff on the weekend, work on Monday and Tuesday, can actually parse it before we come to this meeting and not frustrate people like Brandon because of my misunderstandings.
Thank you very much for your comment. Next, please. You can identify yourself for the record, and also please sign in the book when you're done.
Chris Johnson. Just wanted to make sure I understood. It was mentioned by Mr. Dickinson that this CIP is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Is that the same comprehensive plan that was last updated in 1999?
It is the same comprehensive plan that was updated in 2013.
Okay. And there's been no update since then, is that correct?
No update since 2013.
And we're working on it then. And Chris, would you sign the book, please? Right there, please. Thank you. Anyone else who would like to make a comment? And with that, we close the public hearing on CIP. That, you have a resolution before you. Do I hear a motion on this?
So,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
no, and I was going to ask if Mike Urban could talk both of those, trying to reconcile some of the confusion that might have existed. He did a really good job explaining to me and obviously to Mr. Swenson what some of that confusion was. I thought it'd be good for the record.
Super.
Thank you. And I'm just going to touch on specifically the generator, and I think that'll kind of walk you through the rest of some of these pieces very simply. When the CIP process is chugging along and doing its thing, there's a timeline for it. And then when we sent City Hall out to bid and received those, and there was a timeline for it, and all the points of interest on these two timelines weren't completely simpatico. So our CIP items, as department heads, we turn them into Pete ahead of the CIP meeting. And, we're working off of an engineering estimate for a generator at $260,000. And between when we turn into Pete and when we meet as a CIP committee, now we're sending out the City Hall deal out for bid. And then after the CIP committee meets the first time and before it meets the second time, now we've received the bids in. And that item to the contractor that was eventually selected came in at $210,000. But as the CIP committee is working its way through, then the council's going to hear on the bid, here's your options. Do you want to select the lowest bidder? So it's not a foregone conclusion yet that $260,000 has become $210,000. So the CIP committee moves it up to Planning Commission at the $260,000, knowing good and well that when a bid is finally approved and it is at a lower dollar amount than the original budgeted $260,000 in the plan, when you go spend the $210,000 eventually, that extra $50,000 cannot be recouped within the City Hall project for drywall or some other project. It goes back into the CIP, since the CIP process is very clear as to what these items can be used for. So really, honestly, it was kind of two moving timelines that didn't line up perfectly. So a discrepancy between that 210, 260 makes absolute sense, but hopefully that explanation kind of clears it up. It's a timing issue on the two. Was that what you're hoping?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Eileen.
There was a lot of discussion at the CIP meeting about the generator. And this was something that I felt was extraordinarily important that we have in the new City Hall. The new City Hall, as our current City Hall, supports the Pullman Senior Center Association, and we need to be able to provide Senior Center Council on Aging meals. They provide 150 meals a week to seniors that would not have a hot meal otherwise. And goodness knows we don't want such an emergency, but we would need to be able to feed people in an emergency, and that generator would make that happen. if you have a bad emergency, you just can't go out and pick up a generator. That doesn't happen. I don't know if any of you have been through a hurricane, but let me tell you, those things don't just fall out of the sky and arrive in your driveway. So we felt that this was very important. We need to keep the little kiddos warm. If we have to shelter in place with city staff, we need to keep the building running. Once you freeze up a building, you have a broken building. So we felt that that generator, in the event of a dire emergency, that generator was absolutely essential in keeping our city functioning.
Al?
I have no question for Mike. I got questions for Pete, though. Okay. Just want to go back. I wanted to hear the public comment first. Can you explain to me here the $400,000 for purchase of SYG property for plant expansion? And maybe, I don't know, Kevin.
More a public works question.
Yeah. As part of the treatment plant's long-range planning work we've done in the past, we've identified that property as something that we would like to obtain. So we've carried it in CIP for some years, and we've let the property owner know that if it becomes available, we would like to purchase it. So.
Is that the entire property or just part of it?
That I don't remember. It's a good chunk of it, right across from the wastewater treatment
Right, no,
plant. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the same process we used when we bought the storage facility. Which,
Correct.
We put that in CIP for quite a while before we could finally buy it.
Right.
Okay, I've got one other question, and that is the $70,000 for a car wash removal under the stormwater fund.
Yes, so at Missouri Flat Creek at Stadium Way, there's the constriction with the car wash there. So we've tried to work with the property owner this summer, and we've gotten part of the car wash taken down. It's our negotiations have stalled out a little bit with them now, but we'll continue to work on that. And we have a placeholder in CIP for being able to remove part of that car wash if the opportunity presents itself.
And by removing it, you'd also improve the culverts.
Yeah, it would take away most of the hydraulic restriction. Eventually, what we'd like to do is work with the property owner to do a riparian project there. So if we can come up with some sort of public-private partnership with them, I think it makes a lot of sense. They have to figure out how they want to develop their site long-term, and I think that's probably their hesitation with moving too far right now. They've talked about engaging an architect, but I'm not sure where they are in the process.
Yeah, I remember Kevin talking about this several years ago.
Yeah, no, I understand. But the constriction also is a little bit further upstream, too.
Right.
And so I know that they've removed a large portion of the car wash that was there, so I'm not quite sure what we're talking about here with car wash removal.
So they have removed the structure on top of the slab, but the slab actually spans over Missouri Flat Creek. So in order to lift that slab up and potentially remove the walls, I mean, that's all concrete.
Okay, that's what you're talking about.
And then potentially peeling back and making a riparian area.
I think we also need to make sure that we look just slightly further up creek for, what was the word you just used, constriction?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it happens slightly further up the creek also.
Like behind the silo and things like that?
No.
Other way.
The bridge.
Up by Jack in the Box?
Jack in the Box. Burger King, they're not here, sorry. It just, I mean, if you're going to fix something downstream when there's one further up, doesn't do you any good.
Right, I think what we'd have to do there, the modeling work we've done shows that the main constriction's at the car wash. The Stadium Way Bridge is also a constriction, but it's much less of a constriction. So it would take a major flood event for it to be an issue at that bridge. It would happen sooner at the car wash. But the previous modeling work did not identify an issue upstream, but based on the April flooding, that's something we probably need to take a look at.
I can vouch for that constriction. Thank you.
Anything further from council?
I just really appreciate those that spoke. I mean, last year, we already had in CIP resurface the tennis courts. And when the Harrises came and Rex Davis came and they said, hey, let's do this, it was not vastly different than what we had in CIP. It was just repurposing. And, Councilmember Weller and the mayor were there at the ribbon cutting. We did listen to residents, and that was really good to see. So
Not only Sunnyside, but Krugel.
Right, and Krugel as well. So I'm not ignoring Allison's plea for lights for a future CIP potentially. So.
One other thing.
Yes.
I know that we have in here some money for downtown sidewalks and that type of thing, but we're kind of delaying that a little bit until we get our information back from BDS. And I know there was some discussion because we had already had money in for sidewalk repair and possibly replacement downtown. And can you tell me what the discussion was or where that's holding at?
I think that's pretty much it. We're waiting to see what BDS comes up with and hope that everyone can come to the community meeting on October 1st and 2nd up at Gladish from 6.
Tuesday and Wednesday.
5:30.
5:30.
Okay.
And I think it's important that the citizens know that we're working towards improving sidewalks downtown.
Yes.
There are no further questions. Do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt Resolution R6719.
Second.
Moved second. Laura?
Resolution number R-67-19, a resolution approving a 6-year capital improvement program for the city of Pullman for calendar years 2020 through 2025.
Next item, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next item is another public hearing, this time from Wayne Thompson. Consider Pullman Transit 2019-2024 Transit Development Plan. Wayne is our transit manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This will be a two-part presentation. First, I'll look back at last year and give you a year in review of 2018, and then we'll look at 6 years' worth of strategies and goals for transit. As a public hearing, I am also interested in your input, your feedback. We'll come back at a later date and approve the document. I'm not asking for approval tonight. I'm interested in input. So my interpretations, my goals, if you can add to those or clarify, I'd be happy to hear that. 2018, there were no changes in the fares to ride the vans or buses. It was actually a year in between 2017, a full fare ride went up by a quarter, and the coming year, the pending year, 2019, was just about to go up one final quarter. The fixed route ridership was up second year in a row after a 5-year decline that ended in 2016. Ridership numbers for fixed routes were up 3.2%, and we were just shy of 1.4 million rides. And year-round, that includes our slower summers, our Sundays, we're still at 45 rides per hour, per service hour. Dollar ride, another record year, we were just shy of 24,000 rides, and 5 years in a row, that service has provided over 20,000 rides. And just like the fixed routes, a 3.2% increase in ridership. We again, in 2018, provided the free 4th of July shuttle bus service, and we contracted with WSU Athletics for the football game day shuttle service. Probably our biggest change in 2018 for the fixed routes was the addition of the Paradise route, which ran right down Paradise Street, reintroduced the stop in front of City Hall. This added route allowed us to take our route frequencies back from 45 minutes to 35 minutes. We also looked at our north and south routes. We expanded those into more residential service areas. They stayed 45 minutes. And we renamed those routes to their current names of the wheat and lentil routes. For the capital at Pullman Transit, we received a new dollar ride van in 2018. It was our first Ford Transit. We also placed an order for probably our last fully electric hybrid bus, and that actually, by the way, arrives in less than a month now. We had several strategy discussions, many of those right here, on the future of bus propulsion, reducing the emissions, and we are moving towards electric buses based on those discussions. Our current fleet size is 22 buses. 16 of those are diesels, 6 are electric hybrids, and 6 gas-powered dial-a-ride vans. 2018 was a year of implementing the, we call it AVL GPS. It's the interface between the drivers and the dispatchers and the public. You'll see it as an app or a desktop application that lets you see where your bus is or when it'll be coming. We spent a lot of last year getting that up and going. It's a big improvement over a previous product. It's the app that you may use as a rider. We see better reports on a daily basis. It automatically counts people as they board and depart the buses. To close out, we continued our contracts with Washington State University, Pullman School District, and a local branch of the Spokane Falls Community College. Those 3 contracts provided over half of our operating budget for Pullman Transit. Very much appreciate that. And our staffing remained 32 drivers. We had 6 dispatchers, 5 bus washers, and 4 members of the management staff. So that was a year in review for 2018. So now I would like to look at the True Transit Development Plan, which is a 6-year forecast of our goals and our strategies. This is a process that all transit agencies that receive State Department of Transportation funding do annually. And as I said, it's a 6-year plan. The projections I've given in the report are for growth, but slow growth, based on the residential and the campus growth that we obviously see. Any changes in service, I would hope, would be incremental. You're not going to see a bus every year. If we do have a bus, it'll be well planned out, added every, say, 3 to 5 years. Similarly, with dial-a-ride, it would be incremental as we expand the fleet or the staff. And a good example is the current year, 2019. We added 2 hours of daily dial-a-ride service Monday through Friday, and we did that by increasing a 3/4 time driving position to full-time. Similarly, I'm fairly conservative in the growth projections for both revenue and expenditures. I want to see the reserves build for both operations and for capital. I don't want to be off on those figures. We are feeling pressure to expand service beyond the city limits, in particular Moscow. There's always that request to put service to Moscow, but unless we do a competitive charter bid process that's approved through the FTA, that's beyond our service area and our scope of service. The routes, the next major change I see in the routes will be an added bus, which would allow us to go to 30 minutes. So the reasoning behind an added bus would be to allow us to serve residential growth that you already see north and south of town. Those areas that are in city limits, we will soon have to serve. And by going to 30-minute routes, that will be enabled by an additional bus that we would add to the Paradise, Silver, Loop, and Bloom. What I foresee for capital at Pullman Transit is to continue to replace vehicles on a cycle of bus 1 year, van 1 year, bus, van. Often the buses come in pairs. The coming bus is a single. But ideally, the pairs have worked well. ERD, the city mechanics, have done an excellent job of maintaining the fleet that we have. The state standard for replacing buses is to get 12 years and 500,000 miles. We're able to get, on an average, 15 years and 750,000 miles out of our buses. And similarly on the vans, the state says 5 years and 150,000 miles. We're getting 7 years and 250,000 miles. That's still in a state of good repair for us. So we want to continue that cycle, not be wasteful. We'll also look at our bus stops, at our shelters. We may add some stops, we may take some stops out, but all systematically based on distances, walking paths, based on the need and efficiency. We'll look at the seating, the shelters, the lighting. Those are all projects that we're actively looking at each year. We do continue to work with the WSU Architecture Department on bus stop enhancements, even though the larger project at the Safeway shelter pretty much has stopped. We didn't gather the funding we needed for that. We do continue those discussions on a much smaller scale. What can we do at a bus stop? What can we do with a post or a seat? So that does continue. We do have a need to expand our current facility, both for storing buses and for staff, and I envision that as probably our next large grant opportunity. We will continue those discussions, research and discussion on the noise and pollution issues that right now electric buses appear to be our solution to. If electric isn't the solution, there may be other answers out there that we can look at. Fares, with the increase that went into place this year, a full fare ride is $1. That's the last planned increase we have, but we're already looking ahead to reductions, some fare-free days perhaps, looking at Lentil Festival Day, the entire Saturday perhaps we can make that fare-free. 4th of July, not just the shuttle buses, but the entire day. Moms and Dads Weekend, formalize that as a fare-free day. We'd also like to give discounts to businesses that buy passes in bulk, encourage them to provide bus passes for their employees and help with some parking congestion. So ideally, that'll come to you as a resolution this winter. Goals, I come up with words like efficient and responsible financially, but sustainable really is the word that describes what we're trying to do. We want to develop and strengthen some of the partnerships that we already have. Our local police department provided the training last month for our drivers for onboard emergencies. Local fire department provided the annual first aid training as they have done for us. We will continue to work with those contract partners we have with WSU, the Pullman School District, and the Spokane Falls Community College branch to meet the needs of their folks through those contracts. And I want to emphasize we're going to continue to work to build the trust in relationship with our local labor union, ATU 1015. That's a big one for us. My next step will be to come to you after I get feedback tonight, mid-October, I believe, and ask your approval to adopt the transit development plan. Open to any questions at this point.
Questions of the council now? Yes. We'll go Nathan first and then Brandon.
Great report. I have a couple questions regarding particularly the conservative estimate. Now, we've seen very rapid growth here at Pullman, I would think beyond what we expected about 5 or even 10 years ago. Do you have other scenarios that you've looked at beyond 1% increase?
No. This is a long-range plan, and we expect we'll look at real numbers in the current year. We are going to meet soon with WSU and our own planning staff to see how to meet the needs of those residential developments. So we're not going to add a bus at Christmas time. If there will be a bus, it would be probably in August of next year, and likely one at a time. It'd have to be funded and sustainable. But this is a foundation for what happens for real on a daily basis. Very, very conservative. We don't want to give, don't overestimate what we're going to provide, being very cautious.
Just a few other questions, if that's okay. The Community Action Center, I know you discussed shelters and at bus stops, and I'm just going to put a plug in that I would really encourage looking at a shelter for the CAC bus stop area. I know I've seen people wait there in the snow, the rain,
so noted.
And also in that same area, something that I've seen, and I think I discussed this a little bit, maybe with Adam or maybe with you earlier. There's two stops right there, right by the mall.
And they're only about 50 yards apart from one another. One is CAC, and then one right across from the old Ace Hardware building. And I would just encourage, if some time needs to be shaved off or something along those lines, I see more people at the CAC than I do at the
that's
Ace. And the last thing I will say also is, at the Whitman County Community Health Needs Assessment Forum yesterday, it was discussed, and this was held by Innovia and Lewis and Clark Health, so on. One major need that has been discussed over and over again, and you mentioned it, is regional transportation. This is something that I think I've been advocating for almost as long as I've been on council, and it was partly because we lost that during the recession when both the universities pulled funding for the bus between Moscow and Pullman. I know it's not in our wheelhouse right now, not within the budget that we have right now, but I would encourage you to continue to think about that and vision about that, because I would very much like to encourage that in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for your report.
Brown?
Wayne, I just had a quick question about facilities. You mentioned maintaining existing facilities, and I didn't know if that included expansion of facilities. You're getting a lot of data now, so you know which stops are having a lot of people. Anecdotally, I could just say, if I'm driving past the stop that's by Walmart, I mean, there's so many people sometimes at that stop, they're definitely not fitting within the little structure there. And I was curious if we are looking at any of those for expansion. So it's not a new stop, it's not necessarily a new shelter, but maybe an expanded shelter in some of those areas.
Sure, and that's a good location. We've done that in the past. The Dismore's stop was the most recent. We put a larger shelter in. Dismore's? In fact, the shelter at Walmart is the one that was at Dismore's, so perhaps it's time to move that along and get a larger one. But the data will tell us that. So that's a good location to look at.
Just on the CIP projects for transfer station improvements, we have 10,000, and then we bumped that up to 50,000 and 50,000. What are we kind of looking at or anticipating with those types of improvements?
Large scale would be to perhaps put in a public restroom, perhaps put in some driver amenities like a refrigerator, microwave. Right now, the two rooms are both restrooms, and we can't put either of those two items, a stove or refrigerator, in with the restrooms. Another thought that I'm having is that as we look ahead and expand the system by much more, we'll outgrow what we can do at that site. Right now, 4 and a 5th bus makes it pretty tight. So we've held off on doing much more than paint it recently. So we may be looking at a relocation if property were available. But that's the type of thing that we've looked at. The island shelter in the middle, we painted it. We could have replaced it as part of our early plans. So some of the expenses we had in mind, we've held back on.
I appreciate that you're thinking about potential relocation, because I've had some concerns about that location, and if we do much more expansion, and if we start to get to after the 2020 census, if we are looking at upgrading to a different transportation area and adding other transportation options, that area is quickly going to seem very small. So
It is. It's small, and it's difficult to exit in particular. To turn left from there onto Davis Way is very difficult.
Right.
Any other council comments? This time, then, we'll open the public hearing on the 5-year transit plan from 2019 to 2024. We've heard a brief presentation from Wayne. Is there anyone who would like to make comments about that? Please come in, identify yourself for the record, then you can sign the book in later.
Thank you.
And everyone has 3 minutes.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Josh Heiler. I wanted to speak a little bit on the topic that Mr. Weller actually brought up. So I first came down to Pullman in 2013, so that was right when we were doing the last round of the TDP. Since then, we've definitely seen some significant improvements in the system. Obviously, the new routes, the frequency has increased. The new tracking system is fantastic, I have to say. There definitely is, though, at this point, a sense that I get that this still doesn't really offer the real sort of alternative to owning your own vehicle and driving that I think when we're looking at the economic situation, especially with students nowadays dealing with the environmental situation we're dealing with now, something that's I think really important to people. And when you combine that with the fact that we're seeing significant growth in Pullman, we're seeing significant growth in Moscow, we're seeing significant growth in Colfax even, the fact that we're just these islands of towns that don't have any real transit connection besides a really poor private system that almost is a market failure in a lot of ways is frustrating. And I would really, I understand that we have to be conservative. We don't have a huge tax base here, but we do have a system which is fundamentally based on intergovernmental partnership. I mean, like you were saying, we have 50% of revenue comes from the WSU partnership. So I think we have a lot of opportunity there where we could be reaching out to other cities, to Whitman County, to University of Washington, to University of Idaho, to get the money we need to really create this sort of regional transportation system. And I'd really like to see even more focus put on something like that. And that's just not something I see right now with the plan that we have right here, where I see a very conservative plan that is very status quo. We're talking 6 years in the future, we might have a different federal administration. When it comes to creating the sort of interstate contracts that we would need to set up that bus to Moscow, I think that when we're looking at that time into the future, putting this a little higher on the agenda is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment on the transit plan? Going once. Then we close the public hearing on that. And again, as mentioned, he'll come back later with a resolution on this. Move to item number 4 is a resolution authorizing acceptance of the state and federal funding through Washington State Department of Transportation, the capital grant. And again, Wayne Thompson.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Every 2 years, we have the opportunity to work with our regional transportation planning organization and rank our projects to go to the Washington State Department of Transportation for consideration. These are usually operational projects, capital, some expansion projects, technology projects. We do tend to put more emphasis on our operational grants, both dial-a-ride and fixed routes. But this year, we also did put in 2 capital grants, lower-ranked capital grants. We were fortunate they did well. All of our capital grants were funded, and they've all been combined into this single contract grant award. And the funding is for 80% of these projects. The remaining 20% balance we will cover locally. So the project list is a video system to replace our current bus and facility video system, a new antenna for our radio base station, which we're having trouble with, dead spots on the radios, a replacement shift scheduling software for dispatch, a new dial-a-ride van, replacement lifts for 2 older dial-a-ride vans, and 2 electric buses, 35-foot electric buses. The grant total is $1,774,494. Most of this is federal, about $90,000 is state for the dial-a-ride van and the lifts. We have 2 years to spend the money, the 2019 to 2021 biennium. With your approval by adopting the resolution, I'd like to get started right away spending the funds on these capital projects. Thank you.
Questions of Wayne on this? Is there a motion on this resolution to accept money?
Yeah, move to adopt.
Okay, I've got to move in a second. Okay. Laura?
Resolution number R-68-19, a resolution authorizing the acceptance of state and federal funding through Washington State Department of Transportation, capital grant number PTD 0098 for Pullman Transit.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 5 is a resolution authorizing execution of an engineering services agreement between the city and Parametrics. With that, Kevin Gardis.
Thank you, Mayor. The city has been planning for some time to extend city utilities to the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport. In 2014, the city constructed a large diameter gravity sewer extension to the intersection of Terraview Drive and Grimes Way. That was a partnership with WSU and the city. In March of 2018, council approved an engineering services agreement with Parametrics aimed to complete a preliminary engineering design for extension of that sewer line from Terraview and Grimes to Airport Road, and then as far as practical by gravity to an area near the site of a future terminal. In January, staff worked to prepare a budget request through Senator Mark Schessler's office to extend both water and sewer to the airport. The sewer scope also included lift stations and sewer lines within the airport itself. The initial grant ask was for $5 million of a $6.86 million project. Ultimately, Pullman was awarded $1.626 million for the project. As a result, staff have scaled back the initial project scope to just a sewer extension to the future terminal area. The estimated remaining cost for this work, the sewer extension, is $2.25 million. After subtracting the grant amount, the remaining cost to the city is estimated at $655,000. Staff are currently working on a grant agreement through the Department of Commerce that will come to council at a future meeting. City staff contacted Parametrics, Inc. and developed a scope of work for final design, bidding, and construction services. The engineering work is to be performed on a cost reimbursable basis with an estimated budget of $68,800. Funding will be from the Utility Capital Projects budget of the Utility Fund, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Kevin on this?
Yes, yeah, I don't mean to sound dense, so you walk me through this here. So, the main issue that I saw in your memo was that we had insufficient water flow to meet fire flow demands, and it says that that was met. So
that's what the water tank is up by the airport.
And then it says we're receiving other water from WCU's water system. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out what the virtue is if we're getting water out there and I don't see that there wasn't a problem that wasn't already met to switching over to the city if we're already getting that from WCU.
Sure, good question. The background I provided probably was a little bit incomplete, but when the city first started talking about getting city utilities to the airport, there wasn't a water fire flow system. Really, the domestic water service to the airport was just for the terminal. All the hangars have private wells. They all have septic tanks. And so it's been a bit of a hindrance for development in that area, not having a centralized sewer system and a municipal water system. So back in 2009, and that was the bond that got paid, council approved paying off at the last meeting. Part of that bond fund went to pay for a fire flow system, but that water system at the airport is strictly for fire flow. It's not for domestic purposes at all. So I think that's probably the missing link. So what we've talked about over time in planning work with council is getting both the city's water system and its sewer system to the airport proper. And so this project tonight that's in front of you would provide the final bit of design work to get the sewer system to the airport proper. Then we would still have to construct a system within the airport and the surrounding area as it develops. And then we also have a CIP project that you approved earlier that looks at getting the water system to the airport as well, the city's water system, which is currently at Terraview and North Fairway.
So,
Brendan, you still...
Go ahead.
Okay.
So with this future expansion, bringing these services out to the airport, would that just service the airport, kind of airport side and development within the airport boundary, or would that service projects, future development on the other side of the road as well?
It could potentially serve the other side of the road as well. It would be more of a regional thing.
Any further questions on this?
No, I'm just trying to reconcile the different things that we tell people when we develop, they'll be responsible for doing certain things, and so I'm just trying to figure out, in this case, if we're putting in the infrastructure, is there any kind of buy-in from those that are choosing to go out there and, you know, are they going to help share in the cost of the infrastructure that we put in, or are we just paying for?
Right now, we're just paying for an extension. And this has been something that the council has done on a number of occasions that I can think of in the 15 years I've been with the city, where a lot of times you have to go through area where there isn't much development potential. You know, if you think about it, the way a lot of development occurs, it's sequential. One developer puts in water and sewer, the next one connects onto it. We just need to make sure the pipe sizes are appropriate as they go. But where you have blocks of area, like along Terraview Drive between Grimes Way and Airport Road, which won't get developed, the city ends up having to foot the bill for pushing those utilities out. Now, when people connect out there, they'll pay a connection fee to the city to connect to the water and sewer system.
As we put water and sewer all the way down to Albion Road for the Port of Whitman because of that development down there. Right. So we worked on that. Any further questions?
Thank you.
Further
Was
questions?
WSU going to tie into that at all?
I think they.
Grimes Way and
I think
Airport?
there will be a few connections on some of their relocated properties and some of the ones that'll still exist. And we'll have to pick them up as we go by. They're still active.
They joined us in putting the sewer down Highway 270 to Terraview.
Yeah, I think
where
it was.
we put a lift station right.
I think it was the tune of about $800,000 of a little over $2 million project, because they had a lift station there that was going to be very expensive to replace, and they said, hey, if you bring gravity sewer out to that point, we'll give you the money we would have spent on that lift station.
So, that was okay. Any further questions? If not, do I hear a motion on this resolution for the engineering services group?
Move to adopt R6919.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Laura?
Resolution number R-69-19, a resolution authorizing the execution of an engineering services agreement between the City of Pullman and Parametrics, Inc. for the Terraview Drive Sanitary Trunk Sewer Project.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item number 6 is a motion to approve a reclassification of a parks and government building position as outlined. With that, Mike Urban.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again, council. Before you tonight is the reclassification of several positions in the Parks Department and the Building Maintenance Department, and there's a lot of moving pieces to what we're proposing here. So if I can trouble you to look at your organizational chart that I provided as part of this, it might help follow along. I reread my draft to you today in preparing for this, and I wish I would have organized it a little better, so I apologize for that. I'll get it a little more under control. So the reason I'm before you tonight is we have a retirement coming up in October with Dwayne Hahn, who's been our building maintenance supervisor. He's been with the city for 34 plus years, and he's going to hang him up. And what that has done in the building department, or the building maintenance department, is created a need to look at what the next steps for it. Well, in 2018, the city worked with, bear with me, I'm looking through my notes, Barney and Worth, Inc. to work on a plan, and I also included that presentation in your packet, and particularly on slide 8, where they recommended that the buildings department, the parks department get kind of brought in together. So you're basically taking the group that's involved in charge of all the horizontal surfaces and also the vertical surfaces now, and kind of combining that. And when I went looking to provide this packet to you, I noticed that City Code 126 already has a public services department still in the code where rec, parks, and buildings already exist. So that's why I'm before you tonight for the reclassifications to absorb these extra positions from building our government buildings out of public works and tuck them into the parks as we're recommending. So the organizational chart, you'll see we'll have a head of that group. The parks manager position would be reclassified to the parks and facilities manager. And underneath him, you'll have the position of the former lead parks maintenance worker to become the Parks and Facilities Maintenance Supervisor, where they will supervise the custodians, the 6 existing parks workers who we're requesting to be reclassed as Parks and Facilities Maintenance workers, bringing in the 2 building maintenance positions, so that'll be a group of 8 instead of 6 parks, 2 buildings. And the advantage of doing that is now you got a deeper bench of 8, and there's plumbers and electricians that are existing in parks that can be sent out to do building work, so there's the potential of saving dollars without having to hire outside vendors to come in and do some of these works. So it's a good opportunity to redeploy. The other pieces that go along with these reclasses is there's a 3/4 time administrative specialist position in rec. I'd like to move that to full-time starting October 1st. It's already in the budget for 2020 to move to full-time, and by doing so, that can take over some of the administrative work that was formerly done by Public Works in their realm when they were essentially running the building maintenance department. And by doing that, the $3,580 that I've projected to cost for all this reclassification, the preponderance of that is that 3/4 time position going full-time. The last piece of this, before I take any questions, would be the bringing parity to the parks workers, since we're bringing them up and giving them more responsibility and asking them to do more things with facilities as well. We are proposing to bring them up to parity with the current building maintenance worker, and the proposed empty position, since Dwayne's retiring, that'll leave a position higher that down at that deal, so there'll be parity at the same level across for all of those, because some days they may be working in parks and some days we may send them up to City Hall and do something. So it's very brief. I wrote a lot more, but I'd be happy to take any questions. I don't want to belabor this as well.
Questions? Okay, Nathan first.
Mike, thank you. I was wondering, could you explain a little bit about the community improvement representative?
The community improvement representative as it exists right now, we discussed this amongst the group when Dwayne announced his retirement and how we were going to look at that. We did not see that position really changing at this point in the day. They would still be doing their current position. And any facilities requests for repairs or those type of items probably will still be staff-driven as you're walking through the halls or this or that comes on. So we're going to direct that directly to the Parks and Facilities Maintenance Supervisor.
Awesome, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, Mayor. So could you explain, you mentioned something about redeployment. I've heard, I'm going to say the challenge, not a complaint, but the challenge in the number of bodies in parks, that there's a lot of parks and there's not enough people to maintain some of those. And so now, are we saying that we're adding bodies that could be deployable to things that deal with parks, or are we having another thing underneath, I guess in this case Alan's purview, that is going to make it harder to do stuff right now where they're already, having difficulty covering this vast expanse of land and parks? And
this is a day-to-day operational issue that when I look at what's going on in parks right now and I look at what's going on in buildings, if I'm speaking out of church towards Alan or Dwayne or Kevin at this point, I apologize, but if there's a slow day in parks, like it's November and there's not a whole lot of waiting to go on, but all of a sudden it's snowing and we need more bodies out there plowing, there's a team of 8 now where we can emphasize certain parts at certain times.
That's my question,
yeah.
And when there's some more need in parks, we can have people that they can divert it over in that area too as well. Now, we did add another person to parks about a year ago. That's right, if I remember correctly. I think it's about a year or 2 ago. Because parks was down, as we all know, because of the addition. But this, from what the staff has worked out, this would help in terms of deployment.
And the last thing is kind of my own aside to this is, you have Dwayne walking out the door with 34 years of institutional knowledge. By deepening the bench on this, when the next person retires, maybe some of that institutional knowledge is retained within some of this group, and it can be passed in from here to here to here. So that does bode well for us.
Dwayne was kind enough, we have a couple of people who are going to have some medical things, and Dwayne's actually come back and actually covering for them right now, too, so. Yes.
Real quick. I will say, just on the subject of parks, I don't know if it's the additional person. McGee has never looked better. And Sunnyside, when we were there, I thought it was just amazing, the ADA and everything. So it's, yeah, I think this is a great reorganization. But on top of that, I really do think Parks is doing a great job. So.
The ADA and the pickleball courts.
And the pickleball court. It's already been mentioned, but I thought ADA should be mentioned as well.
Yeah. That is nice.
Any further comments?
No, thank you.
No, thanks.
Do we hear a motion on this then?
Move to adopt.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion to approve the reclassification of Parks government building positions as outlined. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 7 tonight is a motion to authorize a reclassification of current field information system technicians to information technology specialists. That is Wayne, our IT head.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As a city, as a city embraces more technology, staff and skills and knowledge grow over that time, making them a value asset to the city. Information technology currently has 2 information system technician positions allocated for 19 and 20. Currently, the department has no path to advance since all other positions are currently filled. Staff is recommending that an additional specialist position be created to replace one of the technician positions. And by motion, the current senior technician position move to the designated specialist position. A position in this class would allow the technician further professional growth within the organization as experience is gained. That I'll take any questions.
Questions on this one? Yeah, Nathan.
More of a comment. I think this is great. Of course, so much is put on the IT department, and it's just going to get more challenging, and having a robust team is really important. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a good group of people in our department for sure.
And they are working on GPS right now. I just want to make sure
The
you know.
GIS.
GIS. And they're doing everything else too.
Oh, I know, they're doing a ton of
Some
stuff.
great-
You have the
great work.
website, the new website coming out. I mean, you guys are just doing a ton of stuff, so keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Do I hear a motion on this?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion to authorize a reclassification of currently filled information system technicians to information technology specialists. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 8 is a motion to authorize the chief of police to execute an agreement with Washington State University to partially fund a research fellow, to provide agreed-upon research, data collection, analysis, grant writing, and other related projects for the Pullman Police Department. Gary Jenkins, our police chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the past 8+ years, we've partnered with Dr. David Macon at the Washington State University Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology on mutually beneficial research projects. Dr. Macon's research is cutting edge and it's recognized nationally, and we've been fortunate to be able to work with him to be part of those research projects that really benefit law enforcement across the country. Most criminal justice researchers overlook small and medium-sized law enforcement agencies because they favor large departments in metropolitan areas with large sample sizes. Dr. Macon knows that the vast majority of the U.S. law enforcement agencies are the size of Pullman Police Department and smaller. And he also understands the resource limitations of agencies our size as well. Dr. Macon created a fellowship program that involves a WSU criminal justice doctoral student to provide research and data analysis as well as grant location and riding assistance for local law enforcement agencies that opt into the consortium that's developed. It's similar to what would be called a crime analyst position, but with the additional benefit of having a research component and also oversight by Dr. David Macon. This is a 3-year agreement at $10,000 a year. It will be the same doctoral student for all 3 years. WSU is also providing funding for this fellowship program. I have a long list of potential projects that this person can work on. One of those is also a study of a potential municipal court for Pullman. So that's something that they could start on pretty quickly. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of our police chief?
Just a comment. I think, kind of the partnership you have with Professor Macon has been really fruitful, and I really like to see that kind of partnership with WSU. Like, there's so much intellectual capital up there that we can take advantage of. I'd like to see us reach out and make these kinds of agreements wherever we can.
And the fact they get a lot of practical experience that's going on in the community is also fantastic.
Right, yeah, it's very mutual.
Nathan?
I just echo what Councilmember Record said, and also you always embrace these great opportunities, and they seem to just, they're always stellar, so keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And he's always on the speaking circuit, too, because of all these different reports he's been doing, which is wonderful to be a representative of our community. It's wonderful. So do I hear a motion on this one?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moving second for a motion to authorize the Chief of Police to execute an agreement with Washington State University to partially fund a research fellow, provide agreed-upon research, data collection, analysis, grant writing, and other related projects for the Pullman Police Department. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 9 is a motion and subsequent approval to reject the only bid received for the portable stage project. This is near and dear to my heart. Sorry we have to go this way, especially looking at the 4th of July and some other things we're working at. So,
We have a plan, and I hope you'll be very happy with it come the 5th if council approves this. So in the end of June, or on June 28th, the M&O department held a bid opening for this 2018 Parks Bond project, and one bid, as the mayor mentioned, for $215,368, which is $90,000 over the budgeted cost. So we regrouped as staff and talked about how there was a little bit of bid creep in the scope of things, changed a little bit, reached back out to Century and explained to them what we were trying to accomplish and figure out a way to bring things back into the parameters as which it was presented to the public to vote on. And Kurt Damon's been doing a lot of heavy lifting on this, as well as Alan Davis and the Ryan Lancaster and Art Garrow. And what we've basically looked at is there's other parts in this bond that would have to cover this extra $90,000, and we don't believe there's the capacity in there with the way that some of these projects are coming, as you can see with the city hall bids and some of those things like that. So we're recommending the council rejects the bid from our only bidder. Staff's already been working on bringing a base bid together, much like the city hall bid, where this is what we need to get going, and we would like to be able to add these other components. And if the bids are more favorable, when we come back to you, that we can make a recommendation that's a lot closer to budget and still get the things that we need to get. We should be ready to go out in the next several days with this bid, and by doing so, 3-week process, turn around, evaluate the bids, be back in front of you on the 5th of November. And by doing so, with the build-out time, we still believe this will be here middle of May, well before the 4th of July, well after the winter season, so we don't have to worry about storing it out in the rain. We don't have to worry about it being traveled between here and wherever, and icy road conditions and something happening, and we don't have a stage for the 4th of July. So it just...
Other events.
Or other events. So with that, we're recommending the rejection of this bid, and we're prepared to go back out and do this again with something more favorable.
Questions on this?
I just have you mentioned not having to store it out in the rain. Where are we normally going to store it?
I have
subsequent years.
I've brought this issue to the attention of several other people, and that is something that has been discussed. There's several sites and different ways being considered, and nothing firm yet. I think we're waiting to award the final deal, so we'll have the final dimensions of the unit coming in, so we know exactly how we can wiggle this in and out of certain properties that we have.
That was just something I thought.
Wiggle is the key word.
That's a technical term.
So do I hear a motion on this?
Yeah, move to adopt.
Second.
Moved to second. Motion to set and subsequent approval to reject the only bid received for the portable stage project. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Council.
Now we go to item number 10. We now move into discussion mode or work session, and tonight Laura McAloon will start it off, and Jeremy Moore, our senior building inspector, is here tonight. So with that, Laura?
Thank you, Mayor. So we had a request, staff had a request from two of the council members to give a presentation for purposes of discussion, ways that the city can address what are perceived as dangerous buildings and how that will work. So Jeremy Moore, the senior building inspector, has put together an explanation of a code that we do not currently have in place. It's the Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings. And then you have on the dais with you handouts from the existing provisions in the city code and the building code that are part of the state building code. So that's for your cross-reference as Jeremy goes through his presentation. And then he's the expert on this. I can certainly talk to you about how to change the code or any enforcement issues, how that handles.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. The Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings is an older, authoritative document. It was last published in 1997. The code is designed to be compatible with the Uniform Building Code, which was also last adopted in 1997. The code deals with evaluating dangerous buildings and the subsequent actions to repair, vacate, and demolish. The Abatement of Dangerous Buildings Code does provide 18 specific criteria that would pardon me. The 18 criteria would assist in evaluating a dangerous building. Once a dangerous building condition has been determined, the abatement process begins. Abatement options are to repair, vacate and secure from entry, or demolish. The code definition for a dangerous building is very similar to the definition found in the 2015 IBC, which is the city's current adopted code. The code can be used as a reference document without being adopted. The current adopted codes as referenced in Pullman City Code 2.10.010 that would pertain are the 2015 International Building Code, the 2015 International Existing Building Code. The relevant portions have been provided for you on the dais. These codes provide direction and flexibility for the building official to determine a building as unsafe or dangerous when necessary, and grants the authority to the building official to proceed with action necessary to repair, vacate, and secure from entry or demolish when necessary. The primary difference between the code we currently have adopted and the Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings seems to be the 18 specific criteria for evaluating a building. And then pages 9 through 18 of the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings Code that were not included in your handout, they address the appeals process and hearing procedures, which seemed to be real similar to what's detailed in our current city code. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, Eileen.
The reason that I brought this forward, the abatement, and it has been updated since 1997, it's been updated several times since then.
No, it has not. The Uniform Code.
Uniform Code has not?
No, not the Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings.
I found a couple of references that, anyway, I'm not going to get into an argument about it. But it is the 18 points that I think are important, and for people to understand that and to put a little more clarity into our current process, which I don't feel we have now. I have citizens from every corner of the city coming to me about a problem building in their neighborhood, and they explain things to me, and it makes perfect sense. But the answer I get back from staff is often, well, it's secured against unauthorized entry. Well, there's way more to it than secured against unauthorized entry. And that's the part that I don't think the city is addressing. And that also the document that you placed in front of us, and I have read it, it talks more about occupation of the building. Well, if the building is unoccupied, then it's unoccupied. So the occupation clause in there doesn't get us where we need to be. And that's why I think the abatement of dangerous buildings can be modified. The 18 points, I think, are very important, so we can make a better explanation to people as to why we're not doing certain things. And I'm hearing about problem buildings in every corner of the community, and our community needs to be able to move forward and do something about these. And I really like the language here, and it also, it is point 18 way down at the bottom. It says, or whenever any building or structure is abandoned for a period in excess of 6 months, so as to constitute such building or portion thereof as an attractive nuisance. And I don't see language that is as clear and concise as that anywhere else. So we could either modify our code, we could adopt this, we could talk about it. Ordinance of this type seem to be in so many other communities. I'm seeing reference to Blaine, Cheney, Milton, Olympia, Sumner, Kennewick, Linwood, and then, of course, the major cities have their own kind of codes that they have worked out for vacant and partially damaged buildings. So there's a lot of raw material out there for us to work with and add to our code for clarity. And that's what I feel like we're lacking. We're lacking the tools in our toolbox to make things happen. And I don't know if this would provide that, but it certainly was something that caught my eye.
I think Jeremy could probably speak to how the code gets applied, and how the current code is already written that's actually more flexible than the uniform code for the abatement of dangerous buildings.
And may I make the point, I would note that this pertains to buildings that have been determined as dangerous, which would be, by definition, involving possible injury, pain, harm, loss. It's an inherent risk to the welfare of the public when a building is dangerous. And so there are situations that may be aesthetically unpleasing or unsightly, or maybe property maintenance issue that wouldn't be addressed if the building isn't determined to be dangerous. So.
Could I ask?
We'll go to Kevin here, and then we'll.
Yeah, I might just chime in here, because when I read through the definitions, the 18 conditions, there were a couple of them, 17 and 18, I saw the word nuisance in there, and so I was curious what that meant. And so in the conversations that Jeremy had with the city attorney, I think one of the things that we need to look at is at the beginning of section 302, that first paragraph, it essentially says that these conditions come into play when there are conditions or defects that exist to the extent that the life, health, property, or safety of the public or its occupants are in danger. And so to me, I think this document still goes back to dangerous building as being a health and safety issue for the public. And if they're secured and there's no entry and people aren't going in there and doing things that are unsafe, and the building's not falling down, it's not structurally unsound, I think our hands are somewhat tied, is the way I read this.
Even though dilapidation, deterioration, and decay is pretty obvious from the outside.
So can I ask a question without even naming a building?
Yeah.
But we've got a piece of fascia that's falling down over a public right-of-way right here in downtown. It's been that way for a month, and it's still there. So what teeth do we have to be able to go in? I think that's my question, is at what point do we say this is dangerous?
And there's buildings up on West Main that are becoming a problem. They've been empty for 6 years.
So there's a big difference between becoming empty and being dangerous, endangering life and public safety. The specific fascia issue that you're talking about is being addressed through a nuisance code enforcement action. It doesn't fall under the building code, but it does fall under the nuisance code. So after you forwarded some photos, I sent those to the police department, and code enforcement has already been in touch with the property owner.
I don't know what's the civil infraction on something like that if they didn't want to. Is there a civil infraction on things like that?
Yes, all violations of city code are civil infractions. And then, so then there's a scale in Title I of the city code that lays out the different classifications and what the penalty is for that. And I can tell you, a police officer could tell you what that penalty is right off the top of their head, but let me look.
There is one.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's Class 1, 2, 2.5, and Class 3 infractions. And then the penalty that's assessed for each of those ranges, starting with Class 1, $350 for Class 1, $250 for Class 2, page down, $150 for Class 2.5, and $100 for Class 3. So it depends on what the violation is, but there is a whole process in Chapter 5.01 of the city code for enforcing nuisance violations. That code underwent a significant overhaul in, I believe it was 2007, to provide for more enforcement authority and power for the city and to actually broaden the types of enforcements. But we also retained the very generic definition of what a nuisance is that exists in state law, which is essentially anything that annoys or endangers or threatens the private repose, the rest of any other person. It varies, again, you have to base it on the zone. Whether so for example, noise violations are under the nuisance code. The level of the decibel, the maximum decibel level of the noise violation differs based on whether it's in the commercial zone or it's in a residential zone, as do the hours of day. So there are, in looking through this with Jeremy and looking through what's in the existing state building code, which we are mandated by law to adopt, so that includes the international existing building code, which actually has, that's one of the provisions that I handed out for you, has the definition of unsafe buildings and equipment. And again, it's much broader and more flexible. The code has been improved and enhanced significantly since '97 to give the city more flexibility in making that determination. But again, if you get to a dangerous building determination where you're going to go in and you're going to do one of three things, like Jeremy mentioned. You're going to require the property owner to abate the nuisance, to immediately fix it, or to abate the violation, to immediately fix it, to secure it so that it does no longer create that public safety threat, or to demolish it if it can't be fixed. Even to make that determination to enter a building that's vacant but is secured from the outside, we need a search warrant from the Superior Court, and we have to be able to provide the court with what's the just cause for issuing a search warrant. How do we know that there's a danger to the public's health, safety, and welfare inside that building when nobody can get in?
I'm not saying about entering a building. I'm not taking that to an extreme about entering the building. I'm talking about observing a building, even from the public right-of-way. And you and I have had this public right-of-way conversation plenty of times.
Sure.
If there are observable things that are hanging off a building and it's observable from the public right-of-way, we're not talking about entering the building.
You're right.
You know, we fixed some staircases on some apartments that were just in deplorable condition because a citizen brought it to our attention. But that was something that was moved on. Greg moved on that immediately.
Right, and to clarify, we did not fix those. The city took an enforcement action against the property owner to require the property owner to fix it, which is exactly what the code enables us to do.
And we had a child fall through a carport roof, and that got taken care of as well, but only because that was an extreme situation, and I pushed for it.
We've had issues when we've had fires and we've had condemned buildings, and we had to deal with, there's a case up on campus where a woman was living with an elderly woman, and there was, this queen was instead of a roof and things like that.
Yeah, you could see the sky, and the only reason we found out about it, even though it's in the very dense College Hill area, was because her porch roof collapsed under the weight of snow, and she called firefighters to help her because she couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And the firefighters saw the state of the building, which you could not see from the sidewalk because of the shrubbery and trees.
That's the situation I was
But
in.
it was, and one of the very excellent community service organizations had replaced the furnace in the basement 6 months prior, but there was no roof. So that was an action that we moved on, went to court. It was the owner suffered from some dementia, so we had to go through the process of getting a guardian appointed before we could even move to actually get the house condemned, and that abated. That wasn't a structure. It was so
I know
rotted with water, it could
Yeah.
not be fixed.
Yeah.
But in terms of dealing with things that you can see from the right-of-way, that's generally appearance, aesthetics, nuisance items that you can see from the right-of-way. Being able to see a piece of the soffit hanging down, that's a nuisance. It could fall on somebody. It's not necessarily a building code violation, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the tools in the code to enforce it when we find out about it, and that is what happens. I've heard it said that there's a problem with code enforcement because it's only complaint-based. Well, that's because actually it is complaint-based. It's based on your city employees seeing violations, city council members, administrators, seeing violations, letting the building or the code enforcement department know that that there's a violation, but you don't have the staff to go out and patrol actively for code enforcement violations. So the citizens act as the eyes and the ears of code enforcement, just as they act as the eyes and the ears for the police department, for things that the police officers don't see on patrol. So, I mean, it is a balance of how to enforce it, but in reviewing the code provisions with Jeremy, he can apply the 18 criteria of how do you define a dangerous building. He can use that to interpret the much broader definition that exists in the current city code, to help him make that determination, but he isn't limited to, it has to be one of these things. But either way, if it's a dangerous building and the city wants to seek to abate that dangerous condition, take an enforcement action. Regardless of which code provision you're using, it has to be a threat to public health, safety, and welfare. It has to be an endangerment.
Well, I see some of these things as an endangerment, and I especially see them as an endangerment to our first responders if they go into a property that's in deplorable condition. It's just terrifying. And the one just up above Dismore's there was partially unoccupied or partially occupied, and when they got up there to fight that fire, they really got into it up there. That was a very difficult situation. And like I say, I can think of numerous other buildings that could suffer the same fate. And
I agree in that.
I was just hoping we could get a few more tools to move things forward to satisfy citizen concerns. That's because we hear this every day.
I guess what I am saying, and what I think Jeremy agrees with, is we have those tools, and they are used. I'm not sure, I have yet to anyone give me a specific example of the city not responding to a code enforcement complaint, or a complaint being made to the city that wasn't answered, or an action that the city didn't take.
But I think the concern here more is not that the city is not responding, but that it seems the only reason that the city can take action is if it's deemed a public hazard. And the frustration is that there are other variables involved at times.
Sure,
that people are frustrated with. and the residents up on West Main is, and we have private residential, and then we have commercial, and those are two different areas as well. But it is, I had a property right in my backyard, literally my back door neighbor, that was completely overgrown. I mean, I think the city came in, or somebody came in once a year and just sort of flattened the whole backyard. But we had raccoons living there who were engaging with domestic animals in the neighborhood, that kind of thing.
Those are all nuisances. Those are all public nuisances and can be readily dealt with through the code enforcement process for public nuisances. The aesthetic type things would be dealt with through, so for example, there's an international code or a uniform code for property maintenance.
I don't want to go there.
In reviewing that code, really the only provisions in it that the city doesn't already have in its nuisance code is peeling paint, cracked concrete, broken windows, things like that, those aesthetic things that nobody likes to look at. And it's just a matter of if that's the avenue that if that's the additional set of tools, it's really the only set of tools the city doesn't have. If that's the additional set of tools that you'd like to look at, we can certainly bring you more information on that. We don't have a briefing on it tonight, but I can tell you it addresses rodents, it addresses weeds, it addresses inoperable vehicles on the premises, all of which are already addressed in our city code.
There's a property on the corner of Lake Street and Stadium Way, very, very, very visible property. It's been red tagged for probably 3 years, and there's yellow tape around it, and nothing's...
So then I guess the question for the council is, how far do you want to go? Because red tagging prevents it from being occupied, which is the threat to someone's health, safety. It's the endangerment of life, right? Because they should not be in that building, or you should not be occupying that building. And for example, the building that you were mentioning earlier does not have a valid certificate of occupancy, so at this point in time, nobody could occupy it. And if somebody was, then there are enforcement actions to take. But the next steps that you're talking about, so if we red tag a building because it's not fit for human habitation, where there's some significant code violation going on inside that we've been able to observe and cite them for, and then that triggers the red tagging. And red tagging means that you can't enter the building. The remedy is to require them to cure it, fix the problem, right? And it's going to court and getting a court order to order a property owner to do something that they may not want to do with their own property. So it gets significantly more involved in regulating people's personal property rights than the city ever has historically been, in my experience.
Everybody knows I'm a big advocate for personal property rights, but I think there's a line that we all have to agree to live with one another. And so a red tag building can sit until the cows come home?
The red tag prevents someone from entering and occupying the building until they fix whatever it is inside that triggered the red tag. If they've secured it from public entry, so just like an attractive nuisance, if you secure it from anybody getting into it, it's no longer deemed an attractive nuisance because it's not open to public entry. Children can't go climb in the doors or windows.
Back door's been hanging open for 10 years.
So you need, if you would please give us that address, then we can take action on that. But we need, I keep hearing these reports of there are these places. You need to provide the building department and the code enforcement department with addresses and dates and times so that they can go out and investigate and enforce. You're part of the eyes and ears of the community. So what I hear you talking about are property maintenance issues. frankly, that in terms of what else you can do. Those are property maintenance issues.
And one of the new additions to our website that Adam's been working on will be a place where we can actually take pictures and download it and send that on that app. Goes right to the building.
There are more community-centric ways of enforcing the code. I don't know if Pasco still has it, but for many years they had their neighborhood, I think it was Neighborhood Improvement Board, or Neighborhood Accountability Board. So code enforcement citations were issued by the city code enforcement officer, but it was a panel of neighborhood members that actually heard and made the determination and imposed the penalties on the person that was in violation. So it was local citizens that sat on the board, similar to your planning commission, your board of adjustment. It was a council-appointed citizen board that handled code enforcement complaints.
And that's still up to court test?
Yeah, it's appealable to the court, right? So everything that the city does in one way, shape, or form is appealable through the court system. So yes, that's something that, you're right, there are different ways of addressing it through the standard code enforcement. We're going to go out and we're going to issue a citation, a civil infraction, and we're going to require you to do something. And alternative enforcement options are certainly out there. But in terms of the tools in the box, what I've heard from staff is they feel like they have the tools in their box to be able to enforce code violations when they get the information about one existing.
Yes, that's where I was.
I'll go to Dan first.
Laura, one thing I think might be helpful for the council is if we can get a couple of examples of cases in Washington that cities have tried to do enforcement actions on the types of properties where there's just those visible, not necessarily a direct safety threat, but those kind of aesthetic things where the city has tried to enforce that and then has been smacked down by the courts or upheld by the courts in those cases. I think that would be helpful to see some case studies kind of on what specific examples have been upheld or not.
Sure.
There's been some cases in Spokane, I know, on so-called drug houses where citizens have taken action or at least notified, and they've taken some action where it actually stood up, I think.
Yes, no, they have a program for, but again, they are for houses where there is significant drug activity documented by the neighbors. The neighbors have to get deeply involved with the local police officers and documenting the comings and the goings and taking photos and being able to then go to court and show that this is a drug nuisance house, such that they can take it over.
I just think that talking about this in terms of looking at actual cases that courts have reviewed and getting some of those fact scenarios down and what is acceptable, what is not, is probably a better approach to trying to wrap your head around these issues than looking at codes and model codes, because these account for potential possibilities, and the courts are actually looking at actual cases and then narrowing those parameters around that. So I think that would be helpful for everybody to kind of think about this issue.
So in the toolkit, then I think, we've gone to a point where we can red tag something. That's what I'd like to see, is maybe some precedent on, moving forward or not on those red taped situations. Because our toolkit right now, it sounds like we've got things at our disposal, but it only takes us to that point.
No, it goes, yeah, go ahead.
May I interject? We do get compliance when we have a safety concern with life safety. When we get complaints from parents, citizens, property owners, there might be a deck collapsing or we have an egress concern. When we go out on site as inspectors and we meet with the property owner or the tenants, if there's a dangerous situation, we address that. It might not be the entire building, it might just be a balcony or a deck, and then that portion of the building is secured from use. If it's not necessary for egress from the building, we can still allow them to occupy the building, but then we secure the deck or the patio from use until that structural deficiency has been addressed and repaired. I've done that at WSU just real recently when the students came back. We had a concerned parent that called me personally and said that he wasn't going to leave his apartment till he and his daughter met with me and the housing director at WSU. And we met and we took care of that situation. And there were structural repairs made the same day because of our presence on site, getting teams to work together and get these situations resolved. Sometimes it's not as easy. Sometimes it might be an exterior egress balcony for a hotel or things of that nature. And then there's an egress component. If it's not safe to occupy, we have to address that situation with it being posted or red tagged or orange tagged. But we do get compliance on a regular basis when there's a life safety threat, and if it's not safe for people to use or occupy, we do deal with it, and we get those situations addressed.
And we have offered that as a free service to anybody. If they're a renter and they think their building or their room is not safe, that they call the city, and we have that in the different landlord-tenant brochures. We have that, so we know it's been used. And I know that you and Greg before was out there and responded to those cases like that.
Yes, it gets used on a regular basis. It's a life safety inspection program, and all that's required is that someone who is on the lease make the request, and then we get a written request for a life safety inspection. We're not the mold police or the mice police. It is a life safety inspection, so we have to deal with life safety specific items, electrical, do they have heat, do they have hot water, are the stairs safe, handrails. We have a pre-made checklist for the property management company or the landlord or property owner, and it's not done in secret when those forms are filled out. We notify the property owner or the property management company that this request has been made by the tenant, and then we move forward with scheduling a time when we can walk through and address the property.
Nathan?
I will say in fact, I used the free service, about 10 years ago when I had issues with the building that I was occupying. I rent, and you guys did an amazing job and really, held my landlord to account. So I appreciate that a lot, and I think Greg was the one who helped on that, and it was a deck that was just plywood, and there was holes through it, and somebody had, stepped through it. And then there was a crushed sewer drain. I mean, you guys really do respond, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I do have a question regarding, and Brandon, I appreciate you sending pictures about the hanging fascia or soffit. I'm not a, construction guy. So, so I do have a question. If the person decides not to pay the fine, whatever level that is, what's the next step?
So there's two different types of remedies in the city code. One is a civil penalty that we assess with a notice of violation, and the nuisance code provides for that. But then it also is set up as a civil infraction, and a civil infraction requires an issuance of an infraction ticket by a law enforcement officer. So they're issued an infraction. The infraction comes with the penalty. They have the right to contest the penalty, contest the ticket, or ask for mitigation. If you ask for mitigation, you are admitting that the violation exists and you committed it. But it is a court appearance here in district court and in front of the judge, and the judge has our penalty schedule. I think it's fair to say that the court, within its own discretion, can and does assess lower fines than what City Council has set. That's a fact of the system. That is the judge's discretion. So it's just like a parking ticket. It's an infraction. Or actually, no, probably more like a speeding ticket. It's an infraction, and you come to district court with that ticket.
So now if they pay the fine but decide not to fix the problem, then what happens?
So that's where you would choose, that's where the code enforcement officer, whether it's through the building department or whether it's through the police department, that's where they would choose between which method they would approach. If you're looking to seek compliance, that daily penalty can be very persuasive. I can tell you, though, it's still time-consuming because you're then sending the notice of violation to the property owner. It's a lengthy process. You're hoping to get voluntary compliance. Sometimes you'll have a meeting with them and they say, okay, I'll comply by this date, and the city gives them till that date to comply, and then we go back out and they have not complied, so then the penalties keep accruing, and ultimately, in order to collect those penalties, we've got to show up here in court. I can tell you that Jeremy and I wrapped up a code enforcement action under the building code 18 months.
I think
Greg Colvig started it?
I think
2 years?
Greg started it 2 years ago, that July when we finally got it wrapped up, I believe. It was about
And
2
by
years.
my calculation, weren't the daily penalties over $30,000 by the city's calculation, total penalties?
It was over 30, and then what you presented was reduced. I believe it was somewhere in the vicinity of 16,500 was what we tried to.
And all of which was on the daily penalty and established in city code, and the penalty was 1,500, maybe 2,500.
2,500 and some odd dollars is what
2,500.
it was reduced to, yes.
By the judge?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So that was 2 years of city time and expense.
Did they ultimately,
Ultimately,
did they comply?
that's, we got to the court position and we simply had, actually, we went through both judges. We had continued hearings to come back and be able to show compliance, and the property owner did not show compliance until the third or fourth hearing, I think it was. But that's the point in time when we got to the penalty phase.
Well, I'm willing to leave this for tonight, but if others are as well. But let's see if we can develop some tools or find some tools or examples of way that we can make our neighborhoods happier. Because it's something that comes up again and again and again, and I realize that the process is Byzantine, but there's got to be some ways that we can make things work a little more effectively and efficiently without,
That means coming back with some of what Dan had suggested.
Yes, absolutely. I'll come back, and again, if you have specific examples of properties where you think that I can look at those properties, that happens all the time, that someone calls with a complaint, and then there's a process of going out, just like we did with the photos. Well, it doesn't fall into building code, but this sure looks like something, I can't tell the code enforcement officer that this is how you shall interpret the code. It's up to them, but I can certainly forward it on and say, do you see a violation here, which is what was done, and the code enforcement officer agreed. So there's all that, and again, give me examples of types of enforcement actions you'd like to see undertaken, and then I can put that in the context of the case law and give you that analysis of here's the risks and benefits and likelihood of success or likelihood of failure.
Okay, is that all right? Yeah. So, under new business, we've asked Pete to, since there was an op-ed piece that went in the paper this week, that we asked Pete if he would explain some of the process, since there was some information that we considered maybe not as accurate as it should be. So, Pete, would you go through that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, there was a lot of assertions that were made in this essay. I guess I wanted to start out by saying that the City of Pullman is proactive in its provision of advance notice for development proposals. We do go above and beyond what's required by state law. Examples of that are we post notices at the subject property of a particular development proposal. That is city law, but that's one that we did over and above what's required by state law. We do publish our monthly Planning Department newsletter that has a list of pending proposals. That was started back in 2004 by citizens that said, we would like to know more about development proposals early in the process, so we have an opportunity to come to City Hall to learn about them. So that was a need that was expressed, and so we honored that. And just recently, we started posting all official notices having to do with development proposals on the city's website and our city's social media sources. I did want to point out that the city gets approximately 700 building permit applications each year. And that's obviously too many to bring every single one to the city council for your review, consideration, and approval. And so all of those permits are acted on by city staff if that is what's noted in the zoning code. The city hires staff to process those permits. The criteria by which we review those and make decisions are objective criteria. There are ministerial permits that where the criteria is clearly defined. City Council, of course, has the authority to amend the zoning code and any other development regulations within the confines of state law. And the council continuously responds to community needs by updating the city code. The zoning code was last updated in substantive fashion in 2016. Those were primarily the updated marijuana regulations. And we have proposed updates that will be presented to the council fairly shortly. There was some information in the article that seemed to single out Pullman as being particularly problematic in terms of its development regulations, but I can assure you that Pullman zoning code is similar to the vast majority of zoning codes in the state of Washington. And that stands to reason. I mean, state law does set the parameters for development regulations, and so we have to live within those. And there are established principles and practices in urban planning that are those principles and practices have demonstrated success, so it's only natural that we would adhere to those. So that's my brief response to the essay.
And when you look
that
at
I
the
saw in
monthly
newspaper.
newsletter, you have a number of things that's like site review has been sent back, and you have a number of things that are just, that people have submitted things, but it's not complete, or have not passed on a site approval, and some other things like that.
Yeah, correct.
And I think the one that's raising some concern, obviously, is on Johnson Road, and that has, it's a shoreline, that has to go through the shoreline first, and it has some other steps before it can even go anyplace.
Right, so that one involves a shoreline permit, the environmental checklist through the SEPA process, and then they have requested a conditional use permit with several variances. So all those have separate processes. The conditional use permit and the variance requests have a public hearing associated with those. So, yeah. The process is all laid out in the zoning code and other development regulations as to what to do with particular permit applications.
So it's not a case where they're just, okay, the council immediately can approve it or not. You have a number of steps they're going through before it can even see the light of day.
Correct.
Dan.
I just want to say, some of the recent social media posts that have been put out about some of these potential projects, I think have been really helpful. And I think that's great, and that will go a long way to addressing some of the residents' concerns about transparency and notice and those things. I would suggest, though, that where we have projects that don't have a street address or an easily identifiable kind of address or way to describe that, just putting the legal description up there is not particularly helpful to a lot of residents, because the legal descriptions are written for lawyers and planners and engineers, but most people, I don't think, that means nothing to them, and they don't have any idea how to interpret that. So where there's some of the things that I think Kevin put out there for us on some of the projects where we have like a map with a defined area around where the project proposal site is, in a way that is understandable about where that is within Pullman and how near that is to other nearby amenities, I think is really extremely helpful for people. Because sometimes some of these project proposals, the developer will put in kind of a map or a photo of the proposed site, but sometimes you don't see where that is in context of the surrounding area. And I think that will go a long way to providing more helpful notice to residents that might have concerns.
Nathan?
Thank you. Pete, I just want to tell you, you know, I've sat here, 11 and a half, 12 years since I was 26, and when I sat here, you know, when I began, I was extremely critical of a lot of the stuff that happened in the city. And I don't know if anybody knows this term called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you know a little bit about something, but you think you know so much more than you actually do, and you think you're an expert. And I think to some degree, many people, myself, definitely I'm an example, went through a difficult time of learning just how challenging all of the staff, the directors, everyone, what you have to deal with, the amount of people, the amount of interest, the amount of organizations that not only you meet with, but our entire staff does. And everybody who sits at this table, everybody who sits in the seats out there, everybody wants the best for the city. I mean, we're not getting paid a heck of a lot, and you guys, I mean, you're not multimillionaires, as far as I know. I just want to tell you that, you know, and I want everybody to know this, that it is important to hold staff, even citizens and ourselves, accountable. That's important. But being critical out here on a dais without coming and talking to you or staff one-on-one and hashing out, here's my problem, here's my question. It degrades the trust between the council and staff, and it degrades the trust between the staff and the citizens. And I think that's extremely important for all of us to remember. And it does create a chasm between the council and citizens, because suddenly citizens think, man, the council, they're not doing their job, the staff's not doing their job. We're all on the same team. And I think that's extremely important for everybody to remember as we move forward. We all want to solve these challenges, but we also have to have a lot of trust in each other. So I just wanted to express that.
Thank you. And again, there's a lot of transparency with the city compared to what somebody may have said. Go through that process quite a bit, and everything we're trying to do in terms of even the redesigned websites, trying to get out a different way of doing this. Is there any other new business to come before the council tonight?
We got some new business.
Okay, and I see somebody else coming up. Okay. And again, for a 3-minute time limit. Identify yourself.
Chris Johnson.
Okay.
If my understanding is correct, the revised Code of Washington, RCW 4256, references public records, and as part of public records, your website is a public record. Under the section related to the planning department, it does reference the comprehensive plan update. It was recently, the website was updated recently. The city is currently engaged in an update of its 1999 comprehensive plan. The planning department is coordinating with consultants to gather public input and conduct appropriate research as part of this plan revision. A draft plan update is scheduled for completion during the fall of 2019. I don't disagree about the trust component, but my definition of trust is probably a little bit different than your definition of trust. I think sometimes we talk about trust in terms of integrity or honesty. And I think when you think about trust, there's actually two components of trust. There's also the part that is about delivering results and what that looks like. And I think the difficulty is, perhaps from the public and perhaps what the mayor referenced in terms of transparency, is it's very difficult for the public to get complete, accurate information. From a result standpoint, when you look at something like Evolve and what was done there, and you give a parking variance, when it's commonly known that there's a parking issue in the community, and if you go out right now and you look at Spring Street and you look at where those folks are parked, they're not parked in the underground garage. And so delivering results and that piece of it has to be part of the trust conversation. Thank you.
Okay, Brown?
I just wanted an update on the new website because it was mentioned, and I don't know where we're at in that, and maybe we could, see Wayne's not here.
There was
What's the rollout expected date at this point?
I don't know the exact rollout date. I know that staff went through 2 full days of training on how to make edits.
We're doing training today.
I can email you all what the ETA for the date is.
Okay. And this, I mean, we may not have this information either, but as I was going through some of the CIP stuff today, I saw information on bike paths, and so then I thought of the bike circulation plan, and somebody had recently told me that we have money to update that, and I wanted to just find out if that is indeed the case. Do we have money to update this plan, which I looked up May 7th, 1996? And how would we go about getting that done?
It's in my budget, and the money's allocated. I think it's $35,000. It's a workload issue, is what it comes down to. So, I would intend to probably get this out to. We get a consultant on board, maybe within the next 6 months or so.
So more questions than business, so yeah, thank you.
Is there any other new business to come before the council? Then do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Those in second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?